Hello.
Very nice to meet you.
Yes, and you.
You've been on a wild little journey, huh?
A journey that I certainly never expected, never wanted,
Right.
still don't want. So yeah.
Did you ever in your wildest dreams think that you would have to be an advocate for women's sports?
For sanity.
For sanity, yeah.
No. Never did I imagine that anyone would have to be in the position that I'm in. Nevertheless, me. So like you said, it really has been a wild, almost 2 years now. I graduated college, set to be a dentist in dental school, wanting to specialize in endodontics, which weirdly enough is root canals. So to say that this is a totally different path than I could have ever anticipated doesn't do it justice.
Yeah, it's a minor understatement.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So walk us through the beginnings of this for you. What was your first introduction to this insanity of biological men with gender dysphoria trying to compete with women?
So I'll take you through my kind of timeline here.
Okay.
Started swimming when I was 4 years old, right? I come from a family of athletes. So my dad was an NFL player. My mom, she played D1 softball. My oldest sister, she played softball, went to Ole Miss. My brother, he's in college playing football now. All my uncles won Super Bowls and all this stuff. So come from a family of athletes. Started swimming when I was 4, graduated when I was 22. So, 18 years of my life I really dedicated to my sport. Impossible to put in the words, this, the time and the hours and the dedication and the sacrifices that it takes to compete and ultimately be successful at the highest level. But of course, I was willing to do this. I knew I had to. Right? You don't get to go to prom. You don't get to have sleepovers with your friends on Friday night because guess what? Practice at 6 a.m. on Saturday. All of that to really say it's a lifelong journey. College rolls around. Truth be told, I really could have gone anywhere that I wanted to swim. I'm absolutely biased, and the SEC is the best conference. So I knew that was for me, but went to University of Kentucky. Could not have been a better place for me. Freshman year, right, there was a lot of adjusting. It was a lot of time and hours. I thought I worked hard before. I was wrong. We were in the water 6 hours every single day, with 3 of those hours being before 8 a.m., right? So you practice from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., go to class, come back, practice again from 1:30 to 4:30, ate your dinner, iced your shoulders, went to bed, did it all again the next day. We swam about 15,000 yards every single day, which is equivalent to like 10-ish miles. So lots of adjusting. Sophomore year, still improving though, still getting better. Sophomore year rolls around. I really started having this breakout season, started doing some pretty great things, really had finally developed like a sense of consistency, I think. And about 3 days before we were supposed to leave for our national championships, which of course, the NCAA, think about basketball, the NCAA tournament, equivalent in swimming, we were ready to go, the meet you work all year, really all your life for. About 3 days before we were supposed to leave in March of 2020, our coaches pull us out of the water, sit us down, say, look, if you live in the dorm rooms, pack your stuff up. You have to leave campus tonight. Of course, COVID had hit. I didn't really know what this meant at the time. There's still a lot of uncertainty around this. So I thought this meant we got a weekend off. We got to go home. We'd quickly return. But of course, that was not a correct assumption because upon going back home is Tennessee for me. Right? There were no pools open. There were no gyms open, nothing like that. And so every day I swam miles aimlessly in the lake. I'd put on a wetsuit and I'd jump in the boat dock and I'd swim down by Johnny Cash's house and I came back and I did the same route every single day. Because again, I knew that I had to. If I wanted to continue this breakout season I was having my junior year or my sophomore year into my junior year. Right? And the amount of snakes that I swam by and like dead catfish that are floating on top of the water that like hit you in your face while you're swimming is not pleasant. But eventually we were able to come back junior year. We had to deal with all the COVID theatrics, which I'll be the first person to say that being a college athlete, really being a college student, I would argue being a human during the time of COVID was miserable, to say the least. But especially being an athlete, right, in terms of the mask mandates and the social distancing and the contact tracing and the mandatory vaccines, which, have you ever seen a swimmer in the pool wearing a mask?
I have.
You have.
I have. I watched videos of it.
Well, we essentially waterboarded ourselves.
It's so fucking stupid.
Isn't it?
It's so stupid.
Isn't it? So, but this dealing with all the theatrics outside of all that, really, this was the year that I won my first individual SEC title. University of Kentucky won its first ever program title in school history. And ultimately, I concluded my junior year placing 7th in the country, which I was proud of, right? You're top 8, you're an All-American. It's a pretty high honor. But I knew right then and there that I placed 7th in the nation my junior year, that my senior year I had a goal of winning a national title. So that's kind of the backstory to now kind of finding out about all of this other stuff going on. Senior year rolls around. About midway through my senior year, I'm right on pace to achieve my goal. I'm ranked 3rd in the nation behind one amazing female swimmer who I knew very well because, you know, like in most sports, your top-tier athletes know of each other regardless of where you compete because you've grown up competing against each other. So I knew this girl very well, trailing her by a few 100ths, tenths of a second maybe. But the swimmer who was leading the nation, by body lengths, might I add, which is a very large margin in swimming, right? A sport that's measured down to the 100th of a second. This swimmer was leading the country by multiple seconds, was a swimmer that I had never heard of before. And this is the first time that me and my teammates became aware of a swimmer named Leah Thomas. For all we knew at the time, right, keep in mind we hadn't seen a picture of this person or else things would have been a little more clear. For all we knew at the time, this was a senior from University of Pennsylvania, which is not a school that historically produces fast swimmers. Now I would argue is not a school that historically produces really anything good. Leading the nation by body lengths, ranging in events from the 100 freestyle, which is of course a sprint, and all of the freestyle events in between through the mile, which, if you don't know swimming, right, think about this in terms of your Olympic runners, because that's like saying your best 200-meter runner is your best marathon runner. You and I both know that that doesn't happen. They're two totally different systems. But that's what we were saying in this person. So I'm scratching my head, right? I'm talking to my coaches, my teammates. Who is this person? We had no idea. And we continued to stay in the dark until an article came out. And in this article, very briefly disclosed in a blip of a sentence, as if we were really supposed to just read right over it. It says, Leah Thomas is formerly Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team. And so when I read this, of course, I was shocked, naturally. But really, it was kind of like the sense of relief that I felt. Because at this point, I went to look up who Will Thomas was. Because admittedly, I was curious. You know, was this a lateral movement? Someone who went from ranking amongst the best of the men to now continuing to rank amongst the best of the women? Which is, of course, not what we saw, right? We saw that this was a mediocre man, and that's generous at best, ranking 462nd in the nation the year prior when competing against the men. But that's why I say I felt relieved, because I thought that the NCAA would see this how I saw it, and how, again, my teammates saw it, how my coaches saw it, how my family saw it, how anyone with any amount of brain activity would probably comprehend this. Look, nothing hateful about it, nothing even opinionated about it. The sheer facts on the paper in front of us that this was not a lateral movement by any means. But lo and behold, the NCAA did not see it that way. They saw absolutely nothing wrong with this. And so about 3 weeks before our national championships in March of 2022, they released a statement saying that Thomas's participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable. basically saying that, look, there was nothing that we could do. As female athletes, there was no questions that we could ask or concerns that we could raise. We were told that we had to accept this with a smile on our face. So that's kind of the lead up to that national championships and really how myself and my teammates and really the nation, the world, actually found out about Leah Thomas. And I will say I'd heard of this happening in sports before, but I'd really only heard of it going the other way, right? So women, females who wanted to self-identify as men, then going to compete in the men's category, which, look, I didn't ever agree with. I never necessarily supported it, but maybe at the time I didn't see a problem with it, right? Because no one's, I guess, competition, the men's competition isn't being threatened. So, I thought it was dumb on the woman's behalf, but whatever.
When did you see this from biological women competing as men?
Actually, in the sport of swimming, again, there was a swimmer from Harvard by the name of Skylar Baylor, competed on the women's team and then decided to switch to the men's team at Harvard.
But isn't there an issue, though, with steroids? Because if you're going to compete as a man, that means you're biologically transitioning. That means you're adding exogenous hormones, which would mean that you're taking steroids.
Right.
And you're allowed to do that if you're a woman transitioning to a male?
The NCAA's policy at the time was 12 months of HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and you can compete in the category that best suits you.
Right. So with Leah Thomas, I'm sure you got into this. What were the requirements that this 12 months? Is there an analysis of testosterone levels? It
was just 12 months. That's it. That's the only standard. No threshold.
No one is actually checking to see if this person is actually taking estrogen or taking testosterone blockers or doing anything. You just have to say you're on this program for 12 months?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm not sure what the process looked like if they talked to Thomas's doctors. I don't know. But yeah, the policy that had been in place since 2010. So obviously this is a pretty old policy, 12 years at the time. That's what it stated.
So that policy's been intact for 12 years?
Correct.
Really?
And now NCAA, in true cowardly fashion, is changing course, right? They don't want to be responsible. They don't want to be accountable for this. So what they're doing now is a phase-out approach of this policy and leaving it up to each specific sport governing body to make their own rules, right? So now for swimming, they would resort to looking at World Aquatics or FINA, which is the international governing body. For soccer, they'd look at FIFA. For rowing, they'd look at U.S. rowing. They don't want a blanket policy anymore. And again, they don't want to be responsible or accountable.
So they're leaving it up to the governing bodies, and what decision have the governing bodies made? Some
have taken appropriate steps. I don't know of many sports that have been perfect, but swimming, for example, their policy now is if you've gone through male puberty, you can't compete with women, which they were really the first ones to take that bold first step in prioritizing fairness over inclusion. But the policy insinuates if you have transitioned by the age of 12, then you can compete with the women, which is not satisfactory. Even taking puberty blockers before the age of 12, there are still advantages that males possess over females. And even if they didn't, it's the women's category. Yeah. It's not for men. Yeah. So, and then you have other sports that have gone the total opposite way, like soccer, for example, that leave it up to, self-identification. Basically, you just compete where you feel best.
Oh, how convenient.
Isn't it? Which at this national championships, right? This national championships where we had Leah Thomas, who is a male, a man, self-identifying as a woman. We were told we fully had to treat this person as a woman, right? This same national championships, we had another athlete who was transitioning. But this athlete is a female who was then self-identifying as a man from Yale. Izzy now goes by the name of Isaac. And we were told we fully had to treat this person as a man. Optics purposes here, to give you perspective of what this looked like from our eyes. Okay, finals of the 100 freestyle. Top 8 women in the entire nation.
Air quotes women.
Air quotes women. Yeah, for those that don't have video, air quotes women. Top 8 women in the entire country. And you've got a 6'4" man in a women's swimsuit with a bulge next to a woman wearing only a Speedo with nothing covering her top. Your reaction was my reaction, because I'm sitting there watching this. I'm thinking to myself, it's me. I'm the crazy one. It must be. This is the freaking Twilight Zone.
How does the audience react to this? Like when Leah Thomas gets on the block, when they're about to start a race. How does the audience react to this?
As you can imagine, right? Like, there was a lot of silence. A lot of people didn't really know what to do, what to say. There wasn't a lot of clapping. There was a lot of like protesters and like trans rights activists who were there, who were being loud, and the posters and blah, blah, blah. Lots of booing. Kelly J. Keane was there, who is a phenomenal women's rights activist out of England. And she was there, and she, I'll never forget, I'm standing on the pool deck. And at this point in time, like, of course, me and all my teammates and my coaches, we all knew this was wrong. But it's still, I didn't know how to talk about it or what to say or what outlet to go to. And I remember hearing her from the stands, and she just said something that we were all thinking, and she yelled so loud, "He's a cheater." And I was like, oh my gosh, I needed to hear that. So there was a lot of booing, as you can imagine, lots of silence.
And through this, so you have the loud trans rights protesters. And is there anyone countering that? Are there loud pro-women sports protesters?
There were. Not as loud. If I'm going to be honest, not as ugly, which I think that gets a lot of media time when you have these men with beards and these big signs. That certainly catches a lot of cameras. So they were definitely there. And looking back, like I said, like being able to see them, it inspired me. It gave me courage to be willing to kind of put my name and face to it. Because I was scared at first. Based on just kind of the silencing tactics that were used to keep us quiet, right? Like we were told, you know, you'll never get a job if you speak out about this. Your employer is going to look you up and see that you're a transphobe. And you don't want that, do you? You don't want everyone to think that you're transphobic.
Was this a conversation that someone actually had with you?
Yeah. We had to go to training, Joe, to learn how to accept
that you're being cheated.
A senior in college.
Yeah.
21 years old.
Yeah.
They brought in an outside professional, again, air quotes, because what in the world, how can you be an outside professional who sat us down and taught us how to use she, her pronouns? Again, a senior in college. I'm like, am I really?
Taught you how? You, an actual she, her.
An actual she, her.
How do you use she, her pronouns?
We had to go through these interview questions. They'd throw a question at us. If we didn't answer their fake interview question to their standard, we had to go through it again.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Indoctrination.
Thomas's teammates, right, 16 of these girls, plus their parents at the beginning of the season, signed on to a letter expressing their discomfort in the locker room. I kid you not. The university responded back with, and I have a screenshot of their response, "If you, as women, feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here are some counseling resources that you should seek in an attempt to re-educate yourselves."
Re-educate yourself that's a she-ness. That's not a penis.
It's a she-ness.
Oh.
Queeness penis.
So, does Leah Thompson have sex with girls?
What?
Leah Thomas, rather.
Yeah. At the time, again, this is what I know based off of what his teammates have told me and what really has been public knowledge based off what they post and different things. At the time of that national championships, he was still dating women and active with women. Sexually.
So obviously has testosterone.
Yes. But now, again, based off of social media, he is engaged to another man who claims to be a woman. So 2 men but they call themselves lesbians. So who knows? But yes.
But at the time. So
Yeah.
if you're on that team, you're a woman and you have a biological male who's intact, who's having sex with women, walking around naked in the locker room with women. And if you're uncomfortable with that, you should educate yourself.
You
and
said
learn how to use she, her pronouns and accept defeat
You said it.
to this person that's not a woman.
You said it.
And the whole idea behind Title IX was supposed to be to protect women's sports. It's supposed to be to have a place where women can compete fairly against women.
Yeah.
And because of this insane cult that 45% of the country's in, or whatever it is, you have to deal with this literal mental patient in a woman's sport dominating, and everyone's cheering.
Yes.
And everyone around it that's watching it is upset. All the parents, probably on both teams,
Of course.
all the women that are competing with this man, and the whole world's like, yay, diversity. And you
Yeah.
must feel like you're in a fucking movie or something.
Well, I'll tell you, really what had thrusted me over the edge into no longer being willing to lie, ultimately, is he and I raced in the 200 freestyle. This is the day after he swam the 500 freestyle and won a national title, beat out Olympians, beating out American record holders, right? Keep in mind, these aren't scrubs. They're the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers this world has ever seen. And again, he beat them all by body lengths. 1 second might not sound like a lot of time, but in the sport of swimming, again, measured down to the 100th of a second, 1 second is significant. He beat the entire nation of women by almost 2 full seconds. Even the time he went last year would have beat every girl in the country this past season by nearly 2 full seconds, making him the first man to win a Division I NCAA women's title, trailblazer. But the second day of competition, the day after this, he and I race in the 200 freestyle. So, look, we get on the blocks, dive off, swim 8 laps of freestyle, touch the ball at the end. I look up at the scoreboard, and almost impossibly enough, Joe, we had gone the exact same time, meaning, of course, we had tied, which is it's incredibly embarrassing for a 6'4" man to not even be able to beat like a 5'5" female. But again, going a minute and 40-ish seconds and not even 1/100th separated us. You can't tell me that's not divine intervention. But tied, we get out of the water. We go, you can see here, we both went 143.40. Not one of us going 143.39 or 143.41, tying. Get out of the water, go behind the awards podium. The NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself. Thomas, who is towering over me, right, 6'4", and this official looks at both of us and says, "Great job, you two. But you tied, and we only have 1 trophy, so we're going to give the trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." My
Jesus Christ.
heart rate was still high, having just competed. My adrenaline was still pumping. And so the first thing that I thought ended up being the first thing that I said. And the first thought that I had was just what you had just said, right? Like, isn't this everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening? What do you mean you're going to give the trophy to the man in the women's 200 freestyle? I asked the question that no one dared ask all season. And I said, why? Which, of course, he didn't have an answer as to why. They didn't give him a script of what to say when someone asks you the dreaded question of why. And so his first excuse he came up with, he's stumbling on his words, and he's, we're actually just doing this in chronological order, he said. And so I said, okay, do you mean alphabetical? Because G comes before T. Otherwise, I literally have no idea what you're being chronological about, right? We tied. So again, what's your rationale here? And finally, he realized that he didn't have a justification. He didn't have an answer for this. And so, and I actually appreciate his honesty. This is when his face changed. He looked sad. His voice changed. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say. But this official looked at me and said, "Riley, I am so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Leah's hands. Again, you can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back. Leah takes the trophy home. You go home empty-handed, end of story. We can eventually mail you one."
Oh my God.
Is what they said. So it was like that moment when I felt guilty at that point. I felt guilty for participating in the farce. I felt guilty for even getting in the water at this point. And so it kind of hit me. I won't say I was necessarily cowering, because it didn't feel like that to me. I wasn't necessarily scared to approach the topic. I just thought someone else would. I thought a coach would say something. I thought some other swimmer. I thought someone with political power, someone within the NCAA. Quite honestly, I thought someone's dad would come down there and yank this man out of our locker rooms. But it was in that moment where we were standing on the podium, myself included. I'm standing on the podium, and we're clapping, and we're smiling, and we're cheering. And it hit me. I'm like, what in the world are we clapping for? Because, I mean, really what we're applauding is our own erasure, our own demolition. And so it was right then and there that, again, like a slap across the face, I was like, how in the world can we as women, as female athletes, expect someone to stand up for us if we aren't even willing to stand up for us? Like, this has to come from us. So again, I knew all season the unfair competition was wrong. I knew all season that the locker room aspect was wrong. I knew that the silencing that we were facing from our universities, I knew all of that was wrong. We all did. But it wasn't until this official reduced everything that we had worked our entire lives for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a man at the expense of our own. That's really when I decided that I couldn't continue being silent.
And so what was the first thing that you did?
As you can imagine, there was a ton of reporters there, like I said, which swimming is not a sport that garners media attention. But this meet was unique because there was. And so my inbox was filled with different reporters who had been reaching out to me from all the different outlets, left-leaning, right-leaning, everything in between, who were desperately hoping to get a quote or an interview that they could take back to their editor so they could have this story. Because up until this point, remember, really no one had spoken about this, at least not with their face and their name to it. Some people anonymously, even some of his teammates had spoken anonymously at this point. And so we had been, this training that we went to previously, I mentioned, where we had to learn how to use she, her pronouns. We were also told that any media opportunity that came our way, we had to forward on to our sports information director.
Now, had this been the case in the past?
They had never addressed this in the past because, again, swimming is just not a sport where this is ever.
So you had never been contacted by the media previously in your career?
I mean, I had done some stuff with ESPN and you know, I broke the SEC record and all that stuff. And so that was a pretty big deal. And so there had been other stuff, but all mild, like softball kind of thing.
But there was nothing where you had to run it by
training,
other people before you were allowed to have these conversations.
Correct.
So this was the first time.
Correct. And so they told us, though, like, we'll help you coordinate.
Can I ask you, can I pause you there?
Come on.
Do they have the right to do that? Is it anywhere established that they can dictate who you're allowed to communicate with in the media? Has this ever been an issue before where they can restrict your ability to communicate?
Not that I know of. I will say, like, and I'll be honest here, like, my school, University of Kentucky, the athletic side of the university and of this space treated me awesome. Like, my athletic director, Mitch Barnhart at Kentucky, who's been there for 20 plus years, an incredible Christian, just an incredible stand-up guy who leads by example. He's a wonderful human. He's always been supportive of me. Not even necessarily my stance, but supportive of me, which means a lot. And my coach, Lars Jorgensen, who had coached there for 10 years at the time, amazing and supportive of me. But a lot of the kind of silencing and submission stuff came from the academia side or the compliance side of things. So my athletic side of my university was wonderful. But yeah, the compliance side, I was even told specifically, Riley, remember, you signed a scholarship, and when you signed that scholarship, they went as far to say you gave away your rights to speak in your own personal capacity. Remember, you represent us. Remember whose name is across your chest and across your cap, because it's not your own, it's ours.
This is specifically said?
Yeah. They said, we have already taken your stance for you.
You signed away your rights to have your opinions on something that deeply affects your life's work.
Right.
For a university that's terrified
Right.
of pushback.
And understand, this is not specific to just the University of Kentucky. This is why there are so few voices really speaking out in my position, right? Like young college-age girls who have been impacted or affected by this. This is why so few are willing to take a stand. It's because it works. Look at what happened at Roanoke College in Virginia. It's the same story, because it's always the same story, where this mediocre man who swims 3 years on the men's team decides his senior year he wants to join the women's team to become a record smasher. Same thing happened there. These girls, they're getting in contact with me saying, hey, this boy on the boys' team wants to join the women's team, but they told me that they got to vote on if they wanted him on the team or not. And so these girls, they're talking to me. They're like, yeah, there's 17 of us on the team, and all 17 of us are going to say no. And I was like, that's great. We haven't seen really unity in this topic amongst the whole team, so that's wonderful. And so they go into their meeting where they were told they got to anonymously vote. The coach walks in, has the boy with him. He says, hey, I know I told you the vote was going to be anonymous, but it's actually going to be by show of hands, and I'm going to let the boy here give a speech before. So the boy gets up, gives this talk, and he says, hey, if you don't vote yes, I will kill myself, and it will be your fault. So as you can imagine, 13 of those 17 girls changed their vote to yes.
Oh, boy.
And it's because they were told they were going to be a murderer.
And 3 of them were like, go ahead, kill yourself.
But honestly, think
That's
about
a crazy
that, though.
thing to
They're
say.
equating advocating for fair play and privacy in areas of undressing with having blood on your hands.
Yeah.
Same thing that Leah Thomas's school, UPenn, told those girls, that if they do speak out and any harm whatsoever comes towards his way, right, whether it's through social media, through, emotional harm, physical harm, self-inflicted for that matter, they told these girls that they would solely be responsible. That would make them a potential murderer. And you don't want to be a potential murderer, do you? No, so I suggest you be kind, and I suggest you be inclusive.
God, that is so insane. It had to feel like a Twilight Zone.
It did. This whole process, even looking back now, and maybe at the time, I didn't necessarily see it for exactly what it is. Having really removed myself from the situation now and looking back, it's like, whoa, how did they get us all to, not that I ever conformed. Again, I never thought this was right. But we went along with it.
Right.
And how in the world did they manage to achieve that? And I think a lot of this truly, again, being a college athlete during the time of COVID, I think that's when they learned they could control us. Because again, our universities told us during that time, my junior year, the vaccines were mandatory. You had to get the vaccine. Me, look, at this point, I'd already had COVID, right? I had the antibodies, which I thought was the best natural immunity. I'm young, I'm healthy. Yeah. I'm not anti-vax or anything like that, but I just didn't really see the point of me getting the COVID vaccine. And so I said, no. I said, I'm not getting that. They said, Riley, remember, you're the team captain. You're going to be hurting your team if you don't get it. And you're supposed to be the leader, Riley. And so I really struggled with this because I didn't want to be hurting my team. Before my own personal success, I cared about how my team did, how my teammates did. And so I really struggled with this. But finally, I realized, mandatory didn't actually mean law. It doesn't actually mean required. And so I stood my ground. But truthfully, I think that's the first time that I learned how to stand up for myself. And I think that incident and really the whole COVID thing helped me stand up for myself my senior year when, again, the same tactics, the same emotional blackmail and gaslighting, really, that they were using, I think it helped me my senior year too.
Well, I'm sure it helped you see the world now that you're out in a different light.
Definitely.
It's a cult. I mean, and that's really what it is. And it doesn't make sense to anybody who's not in the cult. But the people in the cult, they'll use terms like when that person said, if you don't vote for me, I'm going to kill myself. They use these very sneaky terms like life-saving, gender-affirming care in regards to castrating children and putting them on hormone blockers and removing their breasts. They use this crazy term that seems like, well, it's got to be good. It's life-saving, gender-affirming.
But really, like, think about the message that even just the verbiage of gender-affirming care sends, whether it's to a minor or anyone for that matter.
Right.
We're telling them, especially kids, we're telling them that they're correct to feel as if they were born in the wrong body. Which, what a terrible message. We should be telling them that they're perfect just the way God created them. That's what we should be telling these kids. But that's not the message that they're being sent.
No, it's one of the most bizarre things. And, Doug...
And even, like, even this, like, this verbiage of sex reassignment surgery, it sounds harmless, but when you say it, it's as if you're subconsciously admitting that you can, in fact, reassign your sex, which is so detrimental to the English language. And we're playing into their game when we use that verbiage, even the verbiage of biological woman.
Yeah.
I've got such a problem with, and I didn't always because, again, I thought I had to make the distinction, right? I am a biological female. Thomas is a biological male. I had to take a lot of math courses, upper-level math courses in college, and so I'm sitting there one day and I'm like, if this was an algebra equation, wouldn't those words biological just like cancel each other out? Like, why are we saying that? And then it hit me. I'm like, how silly and redundant, as if I have to add that prerequisite of biological to declare I'm a biological being. That's so dumb, quite frankly. And when we say it, it's as if we're subconsciously admitting that there's an unbiological alternative to being a man or a woman or a male or a female or a girl or a boy. And there's not.
Right. There's not.
So, yeah.
Did you ever see that interview where that bike racer is talking to one of the late night hosts and they were asking
Veronica
about
Ivy.
Biological women?
Come on.
And she's like, well, I am a biological human being and I am a woman. So I'm a biological woman. And the host is just like,
yep.
like,
Yeah.
fucking cowards. You're not saying anything.
Totally.
None of that seems nuts to you.
Totally. And that's the game that's being played here, right? You give an inch, they take a mile, which is why I've really realized now, like, how powerful our language is and the words that we use. Like, I'm very particular about what I say. Like, I won't call, I try and just call Thomas. But people can legally change their name and, like, whatever.
But that's a guy.
But I'm not calling him she. I'm not calling him her.
It's silly.
It's silly. And I won't say trans woman because, again, that's admitting that this is some sort of subcategory of a woman. He's just a man.
The Thais have had it right forever. They don't pretend that they're women. They said, I'm a lady boy.
I'm a lady boy.
Yeah, and that's like okay. It's like an accepted category.
Like, okay. Yeah. No, exactly. Transparency. So, yeah. All of that to say, to get back to the very first question, never in my short 23 years would I have imagined that it's necessary to take the steps and the actions that we're taking, to even have to define this word woman, right? But we've reached a point now where not only is it necessary, I would argue that it's urgent we define this word. In the nearly 250-ish years we've been established as a country, we have never struggled to define this word.
Right.
Yet here in 2024, we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't even answer what a woman is because she claims she's not a biologist.
Right.
Well, guess what? I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
It's a very dumb conversation.
It is. And so a big piece of what I've been working on, I've been working with Independent Women's Forum to develop and create a new piece of legislation that does just that, define the word woman, and other sex-based terms in statute. It's been passed now in 4 different states, Kansas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. Both Oklahoma and Nebraska by executive order, which in great leadership by Governor Pillen and Governor Stitt of Oklahoma. It's tracking in like 13 different states right now. So again, all of that to say it's a telltale sign of where we are as a nation when we have to do what we're doing.
Well, it's requiring a lot more pushback than most people are willing to do.
Yeah.
Because the activists on the side of promoting this nonsense are very loud, and they've made it their entire identity to get this across. And they also connect themselves to the idea of this, air quotes, progress being ubiquitous, that it spreads across the country, and that this is for them a sign that the world is moving in the right direction. So they're like vehemently opposed to any pushback against this. They're really aggressive.
They are.
But everyone on the side that's like, this is fucking crazy. Most of those people have jobs and families and obligations, and they're fucking busy. And they do not have time to sit at a council meeting with these fucking lunatics.
12 p.m. on a Monday, right? I know.
And have them scream into microphones, you're committing genocide, and you're like, oh, okay, what the fuck? What is this? What is this, and how did this get started? It's like a zombie disease that made its way across the entire country, and it was like, oh, who got bit first?
Exactly.
Can we figure out what the fuck happened here? Who's doing this? How is it possible that anyone with children, anyone who's a father who has daughters, is okay with this? How is that possible? This is nonsense at the highest level. And even though it's not like close. You know, it's not like, well, I kind of see their point.
No.
It's not even remotely close. And yet it has been taken up by a giant swath of the greatest country the world has ever known. Like, that is very bizarre. What I was going to say earlier is Douglas Murray, who's the British intellectual, is a brilliant guy. And he said this. And when he started saying it years ago, he's like, whenever a civilization is in collapse, they become obsessed with gender. It becomes a thing. It was with the Greeks and the Romans. It's like, it seems to be like a symptom.
Step in the process.
Yeah, it's a thing like, oh, see those hives that you have? Oh, you're infected. Oh, you're sick. Oh, you're everyone's like changing their gender, and you like 50% of kids in some colleges are LGBTQ2QIAS. What? How is it 50%? This is a fucking mind virus. Like, what is going on here? And what Douglas has said is that you could find this throughout history.
Of course. And honestly, if you take all of the different little pieces of what we're seeing, especially as it pertains to like the cultural issues that are really plaguing this country.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at the denial of objective truth, the shift in our language, like we mentioned, the breakdown of faith. We used to be a country that proudly said, "In God we trust," and one nation under God. You look at the breakdown of the nuclear family and really pinning parents and kids against each other. You look at the breakdown of our freedoms, such as the freedom of speech. You look at the propaganda that's being spread through the media. I mean, the list goes on of all of these different little things. If you put them together, it points in one direction. And that direction, not to sound conspiracist or crazy here, is truly Marxism. Or right, like you talk to someone from North Korea, or China, or Germany, or Cuba, or Brazil, or Venezuela, or Russia, or any of these countries that have once embraced this socialist, communist, Marxist regime, and they will tell you that it's a slippery slope. And it's a slippery slope, but by the hands and feet of our own leaders, the people in the White House, we are actively being led down. And like you said, sex, the most basic of truths, the sheer essence of humanity. Hate to break it to you, myself, every single person watching and listening. You're all here for man and woman. So being asked to deny that is as if we're being asked to deny that the sky is blue, or being told to say 2 + 2 is 5. And if anyone has read 1984 or had a brief understanding of history, like you said, you will understand what it means when we start saying 2 + 2 is 5.
Yeah.
It's a pretty scary, chilling thought, really.
Well, if they can get you to give up one of the most basic things,
There's no limits.
yes,
There's
exactly,
no limits.
Exactly. And then look, I agree with you that it did start during COVID, because it started during this exercise of control and mandating
realized.
things. Yeah, and they didn't do it based on any data. They didn't do it, especially with young athletes.
No.
What they did to do is do that so that if you can get compliance with absolutely everybody, so if you can get the people who don't need this medication at all to mandate it for children, for young, healthy athletes, for people that have zero fear of dying from COVID, and if you can force them into doing it, you can kind of force them to do a lot of things. If you can force them to accept the most chaotic notion, like that we shouldn't have a border and just let people run through, and if it's terrorists, well, hey, I mean, maybe they want a better life.
Come on.
What you're not going to vet anybody. You're going to let them in, and now you're saying that some of them should be allowed to vote, and you're going to give
Right.
some of them money, and then New York City has this scam where they're giving them debit cards with up to $10,000. And then, meanwhile, poor people who live in New York City, who are citizens of the United States, they're shit out of luck.
Or what
Sorry.
about my husband, who's an immigrant? He came over from England, but did it the right way. We've been married for almost 2 years, and Joe, he still doesn't have his green card. Yet you have people walking over the
Yeah.
border, and they obtain it with ease.
Yes.
It makes it harder for people like my husband and my family, where it's harder to travel. It's harder for job purposes when you don't have your documentation that you need. So you're right. It makes it harder on not only Americans, but the people who want to do it the right way.
Do you think about it? Like, why are they doing that? Do you think they're doing it to import voters? Do you think they're doing it because some industries want to encourage cheap labor? That this can break unions, because if you've got a bunch of people that are undocumented, it's legal to hire them and you could pay them less. Why would you need a union when these people are just happy with whatever you give them?
Exactly. Here's what I think. Joe Biden has he has the power right now to secure the border. He has that power, but he won't do it. So to me, what this looks like is the planned and controlled destruction of this nation. Reasons why? I don't know if it's to get voters. I don't know if it's to, what really the purpose is. But make no mistake, this is planned and it's controlled. Again, by the people leading this nation, which is a terrifying thought.
Well, it makes sense. It sounds nuts. And if you had said this 20 years ago, I was like, this bitch is out of her mind. It's just this is
What are we doing inviting Riley here?
controlled destruction of our United States. But now you look at it and you go, well, hold on. If they learned anything from COVID, one of the things they learned is that during a period of destabilization, people are much more compliant. And COVID was a massive period of destabilization to the point where they put into place illogical laws that restricted people's ability to keep their businesses open while leaving gigantic businesses wide open. You walk through Target, no one gets sick there. But if you go to mom and pop's candle shop, everyone's going to die. And none of that made any sense.
No.
None of it made any sense. And they got us to get through with that. If they can destabilize the country in the form of letting violence into the country, and then also at the same time simultaneously cracking down on gun laws in America and imposing more gun control on the citizens. I mean, I don't want to fucking secure my tinfoil hat on, really. But if I was going to do it, if I was an evil person who had this goal of the destruction of America, that's how I would do it. I would get everybody involved in the most nonsensical bullshit arguments, like use 78 different gender pronouns. And if you go and call someone a Z-zer. We had this conversation with Christopher Rufo the other day.
I saw.
The Z-zer thing, he's literally got to go to court because he was not willing to call someone Z-zer. So
Crazy.
he's got to be charged with a crime, and they have to see whether or not he committed some hate crime.
Well, that's
because he
like,
didn't use a made-up pronoun.
This whole new Title IX rewrite that the Biden administration is pursuing that will be, I believe, announced in the next couple weeks. And under this new rewrite, it is sexual harassment. You would be guilty and charged with sexual harassment if you, a 17-year-old girl who's housed with a male in your dorm room, if you go to your administration and complain, expressing that you feel uncomfortable being housed with a male, you're charged with sexual harassment. Not the man who's parading around your locker room or your bathroom. No, that's brave or stunning or inspiring or whatever other virtuous word they want to use. But you calling a spade is grounds for sexual harassment.
Bananas. Like, not even...
Like a whole bunch of bananas.
Yeah, like if you saw it in a fucking movie, you'd be like, no way. If there was a movie that someone put out in 2003 and this was the plot, you'd be like, shut the fuck up. That's never going to fly. That's so ridiculous. And here we are, and it's moving further and further in that direction. You're seeing gaslighting on an unprecedented level. There was this group of people that got interviewed by the New York Times that are super fans of Joe Biden, that don't give it's wild. I mean, it's wild. It's wild to see these people.
I think he's amazing, and I think what he's doing is the greatest one term that any president.
He's done more. Karine Jean-Pierre, whatever the fuck her name is, said that the other day. She said that this administration, they asked him, why does Biden need cue cards for everything? Why does he need cue cards when he sits down? Why does he need why does he need those things? So is the question. And she just rattles off how what Joe Biden has done more in these 3 years than most presidents do in 2 terms. Open the border, kill the economy, fund 2 fucking crazy wars.
But that's what you'll find too when
pull out of Afghanistan.
When you have these Biden super fans, you'll ask them, okay, well, what is it that you like that Biden has done?
He's amazing.
Well, I just like what he stands for.
Yeah.
They can't list anything.
It's just nonsense. It's like, I like the 49ers. That's all it is. They're on a team and they'll fucking support that team full stop no matter what. And it's that same sort of behavior that exists in any group of people that's ideologically captured. Whether, you're a fucking lifelong Red Sox fan or you're a Democrat to the death. Blue no matter who. And there's people that just do that proudly, and they announce it on Twitter, and they get a bunch of people with 30 cats in their comments all commenting yay, and all these mentally ill people. Oh, 100%.
It's on both sides.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been, I've always been my whole life, like I would say before being conservative, I've always been a Christian. And so my values as a Christian align more conservative. But what I've noticed these past 2 years, I've been really eye-opened to the amount of corruption, to the amount of string pulling, to the amount of really crazy people on both sides. So we talk a lot about the left because they don't try and mask theirs, at least the very extreme radical left, like those protesters or the people who protest me, which psycho. I was in Milwaukee recently, and I had protesters stand outside my hotel room for hours, Joe, hours chanting, "Riley can't swim." I'm like, that's the best you got? Riley can't swim? It is. I loved it.
When you're so good that's all they could say.
I would challenge any of them to a race. So we see the left being crazy, but there's some crazy people on our side
100%. It's a human characteristic, and people, they jump into these ideologies not because they're well thought out and because it makes sense. It's because human beings are tribal by nature. And when we find a group, look, I see people talk about cults sometimes, like in a documentary. I'm like, that seems like fun. And I'm a grown man. If I was an 18-year-old boy and that happened, or a 16-year-old boy, and I encountered them, I'm young and impressionable, 100% I could get sucked into it. You can get sucked into the left, you could get sucked into the right. And then you're around like-minded people, and the nuttiest, most ambitious, and most fucking psychotic of that group are the ones on the far outlines. It's the Patriot Front on one side, and it's Antifa on the other side.
Come on.
And this is what happens. And this is what happens with human beings. And those people, they'll allow the Antifa people to fucking blow up things and light things on fire. Like, well, some violence is necessary to achieve a means. It's like the strong arm of the Democratic Party. And then for the right, they've got to kind of ignore the really loony right-wing fucking Confederate flag dudes. Like, you got to like kind of push those aside too. But it's just who's in charge? The Democrats. They're in charge. Who's running the media? The Democrats. Almost
They've
universally.
overtaken every public square, whether
Right.
it's academia, whether it's corporate America, whether it's our government, the media. I mean, every public square, which is why now, honestly, I feel like a lot of people who maybe would have considered themselves previously as kind of like apolitical or someone who didn't really look at what's going on around the world, like you said, have jobs and families, they have their heads down, they don't look at the outside noise. I think it's waking a lot of people up, which is a good thing. That's the beauty of a democracy. Really, the American Republic is having the people as the power. We do have the power, and I feel like we're engaging those people.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's enough people that are realizing that this whole system is like completely fucked, and that it's really just about money and power and control. And they use all these social issues as, it's like a galvanizing force to get whatever their financial agenda is pushed through. That's all it is. Like when the Biden administration is talking about DEI and all this, it's just tied into banks. It's how they can fund businesses and give them loans.
Exactly.
If you have more people that are this, we'll give you more of that. It's just a way to control businesses. And the whole thing is just all about money. It's all a gigantic con game. And the more, like I said, if I was a fucking tinfoil hat guy, if I was thinking this is someone trying to destroy the country, this is how I would do it. I would have people willing to vote for their own demise, not advocating for freedom, if that freedom gives freedom to the people that are opposed to them. We're so stupid and closed-minded, we're willing to burn it all down just to silence people.
Freedom.
Right, take away everyone's freedom. Because I don't want that person who disagrees with me to have freedom.
Crazy. When you put it that way, it's exactly what's happening.
It is exactly what's happening. And it's not the case when I was a kid. When I was a young guy, I had friends whose parents were conservative and my parents were hippies. And they hung out together. Everybody would go to dinner together. Like, no one cared.
Yeah, there's no more gray area, so it seems.
They could talk about stuff, like they could have agreements of what Reagan was good at. Like, there was like conversations. Well, one thing Reagan really did good. Like, my fucking dad was saying that. Like, watching these people today, it's like the orcs are fighting against the hobbits. Like, this is crazy. Everyone
true.
So opposed. It's like so polarized. And again, if I was from another country and I was trying to ruin America, I was like, how could I do this? That's how I would do it. I would do it this way.
Yeah.
And then I would do it through social media. And I would have the Democrats almost universally control social media.
Of course they do.
Except this one wild African American, this one wild genius dude decides to buy Twitter.
Isn't it amazing?
Amazing. If he didn't do that, we would genuinely be fucked. We would be in a real pickle.
Honestly, Twitter or X now is really where I get like all my news. Like, I don't even resort to a lot of the mainstream media places, at least for breaking news. Like, I'll find it on X. So God bless Elon Musk. I really think that he has almost single-handedly. There's been I would say some pivotal people or groups in this culture who have really helped turn some things around. I think the Babylon Bee has done a phenomenal job of.
But they were banned from Twitter.
Yeah.
And that was one of the breaking points for Elon.
Exactly.
When he found out they were banned from Twitter, he's like, okay, what the fuck?
It was a turning point.
But I mean,
and so I really think he's single-handedly almost really turned this culture around. So God bless him.
He's definitely made it take a turn. And for anybody who thinks that's exaggerating, you have to take into consideration that is not a business move that any corporation that wants to make money would have approved.
No.
If you're Elon Musk, you can do it. but there's like maybe 5 of those guys on Earth that
Right.
could just buy something for $44 billion. That's
crazy.
That's really probably worth half that.
Right.
So you could never justify it on paper.
No.
So he's an insane person.
He is.
Who's dedicated to free speech, who just happens to have $200 billion. So he can step in and do that. And when they tell him about advertising, that was one of my favorite speeches ever. He was like, "Go fuck yourself."
Isn't that awesome?
It was amazing.
It was
He goes,
perfect.
if you're gonna blackmail me with money, you're gonna do that. Go fuck yourself.
It's amazing.
And then he goes, "Hi,
that's-
Bob."
It's hilarious. But honestly, like, that right there is what this nation, again, really, this world is lacking, is strong leadership. Strong male leadership in particular. We don't see a lot of these men, right? We picture men as these like dominant, aggressive, assertive leaders who protect and provide. Our nation is failing because we don't have those male leaders. We don't have people who are who have backbones and a moral compass. But Elon Musk has the perfect combination of a backbone and a moral compass, which is
And
sad when you think about it.
Also, he's smarter than everybody.
Boom.
So
And he's rich.
He sees where all this is going. He's like, you people are out of your fucking minds. Like,
Exactly.
what are you doing? So
Exactly.
he literally has to step in and buy a social media platform. And then upon doing so, they release all these emails to these journalists like Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi. And you find out through all this that they've been in contact with the
This whole
FBI, and the
time.
FBI's been telling them to delete accounts and get rid of posts. And
My account was deleted prior to the Elon Musk era.
what did you write that was the big offense?
There are two sexes. I know, God forbid, right?
Isn't that
Jail.
amazing?
Put me in
A
jail.
biological truth. Like, okay, can I get a review? Can we go to a textbook, please?
Yeah.
How many sexes does it say in the textbook? I think it says 2. Does that say 2? It says 2 sexes, male and female. So I was right.
Let's ban the book too.
Like, what is that?
No, yeah. So, but I was able to make a new account under
with
Elon Musk's Twitter.
Yeah, luckily.
And it's the only platform that I've found where I don't get my videos or posts removed.
Yeah, see,
TikTok,
every one of them.
right?
Oh,
I was
they're the
hesitant
most-
for TikTok for a long time for a lot of reasons, right? Like we hear that the Chinese are spying on us and going to take our information and blah, blah, blah. So I didn't want to post on TikTok for a long time. But I went on I had a profile. I'd sometimes view videos, again, never really posting. And then one day I go to my profile and I have like 20,000 followers having never posted. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, clearly there's an audience here on TikTok. And it's unique because it's a younger audience, which has been a big push of mine, is to target younger people my age, to really engage them and help them see what's going on. So I was like, maybe I will start posting to TikTok. My videos went viral, and every single video is like deleted now. But I have like almost, I think, 400,000 followers, having only posted like a couple times. It's crazy.
And so they'll delete you if you talk about gender issues.
Anything.
Now,
I could
isn't this-
report like a factual, real story that had happened, saying nothing outlandish, nothing, and it's deleted.
Now, again, let's go back to my theory that someone's trying to destroy the country. If I was the Chinese government and I was in control of a social media platform that's the most addictive and the most used by young kids, I would have as much confusion on there as possible. And I would have as much men with
course.
beards and lipsticks and long nails telling you that all your kids are going to be trans, and have that shit everywhere and never
course.
take it down. And anyone who combats this, anyone that like starts making sense and resonates with people, get them out of here. Just get them the fuck out of here. This is a propaganda machine.
And they're laughing the whole time.
And it is owned by China. And it is some of the most fucking troublesome spyware that they've ever examined. When guys have back engineered the Twitter code, the fucking coder guys have gone over that, they were like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is the most invasive we've ever seen. It has access to your keystrokes. So, like, say if you're using TikTok and then you're also like sending emails, it's going to know what your emails are.
crazy.
It's going to know. It's going to be able to listen to your voice. It's going to be able to videotape you. It's going to have access to all sorts of aspects of your phone. Not necessarily saying it's going to use those things, but it's
But it
going to
has them.
have the access to it. All that's in there. Now, imagine a scenario where China attacks Taiwan. China attacks Taiwan, and all of a sudden we're in this weird proxy hot war with China, as well as a weird proxy hot war with Russia. And then China starts fucking with the phones. All these people that have TikTok on their phones. How many accounts are there? How many different people can they target that have children? And then these people are high-level political people.
Right.
How many people that are in board meetings? How many people that are coming home on their phone having conversations in private with their wife about the real problems that we have right now with corruption and the Biden laptop is real, and that kind of shit.
Right.
They're going to have all those recordings. They're going to literally be able to listen to anybody they want. They've paid people. What they've done is really fascinating. They've gotten like high-speed internet routers and cell phone routers, and they sell them cheaper. And so people buy them. And they've already found that some of these have third-party accessibility.
Right.
And they're putting them near like nuclear facilities. The Chinese people like we'll sell you these cell phone towers cheaper and just put them over there where you fucking test jets. And we're like, wow, would it save some money? What a great idea. And so we buy all their shit, and their infrastructure is everywhere. They own farmland everywhere, all over the country. And they own a lot of land that's around military bases.
Right. Is this you saying I should delete TikTok?
I'm saying, I'm putting my fucking tinfoil hat on. I think it's like we were like, no, they would never do that. If you think about all the times in history that governments have overthrown other countries, that have invaded other countries, and they've done it with the only methods that were available then. The only methods were available then. You need tanks and guns and planes and weapons and bombs and shit, or
Not
boats.
anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Now you need fucking cyber stuff. And with that, you could literally destroy the morals and the ethics of an entire generation of people, cast aside any ideas. They're trying to do things now where they're talking about minor attracted persons.
Crazy.
And you're seeing elected politicians, elected officials, talking about being very clear that this is an identity, that these are minor attracted persons.
It's sick. It's really that, right? You have people talking about pedophiles being maps, they'll call them. Whether it's this video recently that Libs of TikTok posted of these children, and I think Oklahoma maybe, sucking on toes. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Of teachers or adults or whoever these people are.
Is that what it was?
Sick. Yes, it was a fundraiser.
What, the children
bake sale,
sucked on the toes of the adults?
No car wash. Sucking toes was going to be their fundraiser.
It's definitely adults?
Yeah, definitely adults. Or whether it's now you have these men, the CDC that says men can produce breast milk and lactate. I got news for you. Any man who forces a baby to latch onto his nipple and suck it is using that baby as an erotic prop. And right, they do this under the guise of human rights. It is not a human right for anyone to sexually abuse a child. So all of that to say, there's this big push, so it seems, whether it's the gender ideology movement, there's this big push to seemingly normalize pedophilia, which is grotesque. It is perverse. It's disgusting. Parents who are okay with this, Democrats who are okay with this, who vote in favor of a lot of this nonsense stuff, you're a sellout to your own child. And honestly, I think there's a separate conversation that needs to be had if you are an elected official voting in favor of this stuff with kids. I think there's a separate conversation that needs to be had involving CPS, because again, that's disgusting, to say the least.
And it's always been morally reprehensible. It's always been a thing that we wanted to kill people for. And now all of a sudden we're saying that it's an identity. Again, if I was trying to destroy a country, I would throw that into the educational system, and I'd make it seem virtuous to discuss this in an open-minded and objective way. Like, they can't help who they identify with.
Well, and honestly, right, like, again, being a Christian, the Bible tells us that we will reach a point, and Paul says it in Acts and Romans and different places. He tells us that we will reach a point where bitter is seen as sweet, dark is seen as light, and evil is seen as moral. It's undeniable that that's not what we're seeing now. And look, that's not to say that people who identify as trans are evil. I don't necessarily think that. But what is evil is deception.
Yeah.
Manipulation is evil. Temptation is evil. Lying and affirming delusions, that's evil. And that's exactly how Satan works and how he operates, is in the darkness. But now a lot of it is coming to light. Again, thanks to people like Elon Musk.
It sounds loony when we start having these kind of conversations about like Satan and evil and good and, you know, and biblical stories. But as time goes on, I think that what the Bible is I think at one point in time, there was a very sophisticated society that got wiped out by some sort of a massive natural disaster. And then over time, they told the stories that they had learned since they stopped writing things down, and they probably had to live like barbarians for thousands of years. But they always had the stories. It like literally the Big Bang. In the beginning, there was light. If you told that for thousands of years, that's what that would be.
Right.
The Adam and Eve in the garden, the creation, that someone created this. Like that they were trying to tell us, and that men can go down evil, wicked ways, and it can lead to destruction. And these are some of the symptoms that you'll see when it leads to destruction. It's like this is like a map of civilization.
Right.
It's just so old, and it's been translated so many times from ancient Hebrew and Aramaic and all these different languages down to Greek and Latin and English finally. It's like there's so much like what was really said, what was really going on, because a lot of it seems too on the money. Like if we wanted to try to put this through some sort of a logical filter or figure out like, is someone really trying to warn us about the natural progression that all societies and all civilizations go down if you don't have a moral compass and if you don't follow and adhere to the rules of God?
Well, there's still stuff that hasn't yet, right? Like what has been prophesied that hasn't yet happened. So time will tell, right? I think his return is past due.
Like Dr. Manhattan. In the
Yeah.
If that would be the wildest, forget about UFOs. I mean, UFOs would be pretty wild. UFOs on the White House lawn would be wild. Jesus on the White House lawn, wow. That would be the game changer.
I pray for that. Come back,
God,
please.
do you think people would even believe it? They would think, oh my God, this is Illuminati.
Our media would spin it some way.
Well, our fucking just people on Reddit. Like the people that
Reddit.
are like
what a
4chan
platform.
people. What a platform.
What a platform. Oh my gosh, I have seen some of the craziest stuff on Reddit. And I don't have a Reddit account. That's not my space.
But you go in and look at things sometimes.
But people will post like other Reddit clips. And I speak a lot on college campuses, again, with the intention of really trying to garner support from the youth, but also encouraging them to find their own voice and to be bold and to be leaders themselves. All done through the Leadership Institute, which is just a phenomenal group. But a lot of these college campuses I speak on, the protesters, when they hear I'm coming, they'll go to Reddit and they'll start going off, which is hilarious to look at. But honestly, it's kind of scary. Like a lot of these people, for instance, I was at San Francisco State a few months back, which was my first mistake, going to freaking San Francisco. But I went there with the intention of, like talking about what you and I have talked about, at least from that national championship standpoint, everything that we went through, why it's important. I went there, and what a naive thought to think that these students would come with an open mind and the willingness to have their hearts softened, because they did not. They came with their pitchforks and fire, and upon me delivering my speech in a classroom setting, right? So like a podium at the front, there's seats in the class. Upon delivering my speech afterwards, a group of protesters entered into the room, hundreds of them, turned off the lights, rushed to the front. I'm being like shoved and hit and jostled. I'm like so confused what's going on. Punched, right? But fortunately for me, men in dresses, their punches don't hurt that bad. But ultimately, these protesters ended up holding me for ransom throughout the night, demanding that if I wanted to make it home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money. All the while, you might be wondering, okay, well, where are the police? Joe, it's San Francisco. The police are being held for ransom in the same room with me. I'm looking at the police like, pretty sure I'm being held against my will. Pretty sure we call that kidnapping. Isn't there something you can do to like alleviate what's going on here, to de-escalate and get me home safely? No, actually, we can't. We're not allowed to be seen as anything other than an ally to that community. The same community who's on the other side of that door calling them racist pigs for protecting a white girl like me.
Say that again. They're not allowed to be seen as anything other than an ally.
Right.
So this is like a mandate from the police department. So anything that involves anyone who's trans, you have to automatically support, regardless of whether or not that person's the aggressor.
Let me tell you,
Is that fair to say that?
Well, that's what was communicated to me. Even now, where there is an ample amount of video footage of this happening, there is audio evidence, there are eyewitness testimonies. Again, the police were in the room with me. There's footage that I requested that they never sent me, whether it was CCTV footage or their body cam footage. There's an ample amount of evidence to charge whoever is responsible, whether it's the students, whether it's the university, whether it's honestly the police department at this point. They have come back now and said that the charges are alleged. There's nothing they can do. There's no evidence to prosecute or press charges against anyone. I'm looking at this. Keep in mind, right, the dean of students shows up when I'm being held in this room for hours and hours, 4 hours, through the middle of the night in this room. And the dean of students shows up. He's negotiating with the students how much I owe each of them to get out. The price that I had heard was agreed upon through the side of the door was $10 each, which I'm mad about because I think I'm worth more than $10.
They all went $10.
Granted, there's a lot of them.
Oh my God!
But I'm like,
but
$10?
how funny is that? Give us all $10. We're hungry.
Believe.
We want to go get Subway.
But anyways, the university the next day sent out a university-wide email to their, staff, professors, students, everybody, and said, "We are so proud of our brave students for handling Riley Gaines in the manner that they did. We know how deeply traumatic her presence is on this campus. And so here are some counseling resources for you guys.
Oh my God.
Just know we see you, we stand with you, we see you, we hear you, we love you."
Again.
Nowhere in there did they condemn violence against women, for that matter. Nowhere in there did they say we uphold our First Amendment and the freedom of speech. No, of course not.
The right to civil discourse.
No, forget it. So.
It's so crazy.
And that's just the...
San Francisco's fallen.
Oh, beyond. I was in San Francisco.
I mean, that's really like, again, if I was going to ruin a country, that's how I would do it. I would tell the children everyone's amazing, and that assault you did, that was warranted, and I know how deeply
Congrats.
traumatic that must have been for you. So here's some counseling, because you need counseling. You need to be able to talk about it. So for further fuel your narcissism and get involved with someone who constantly wants to talk about you all day. Here's some counseling. Let's talk about you. Great. I really need to focus on me. And then more about you and how amazing you are that you go hit this lady who said that men shouldn't be able to compete with women. Fucking duh.
Yeah. And then there's nothing that can be done about it.
Nothing. Zero.
So which is why it's hard, like, for us. And when I say us, I really just mean sane people. I'm not making this conservative versus, Republican versus Democrat type thing. It makes it harder for us in this space to push back when we have district courts or our Department of Justice that really is corrupt. It's incredibly two-tiered.
Yeah. This Fannie Willis thing is awesome, though.
Yeah, right?
I love it.
Isn't it just?
It's fun watching her get sassy when she's getting questioned, too.
And that's so telling, right? When she starts freaking out and yelling, and it's like, babe, if you just wanted to be this, or to have this guy be your, like, booty call or vice versa.
Yeah, you're not supposed to hire him.
No.
What the fuck?
No.
How obvious is that? Also, you can't say that you fucking paid for everything in cash. Like, what? Imagine that. Like, this is what we'll say.
Right.
This is how I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him right here.
That'll work.
I'm going to tell him I paid it all in cash. Sorry, no records. All in cash. Where'd you get the cash? I had cash.
I just
Where'd
had
you
it.
get the fucking cash? You got $50,000 laying around? Who does that?
But they do that because they know there's a chance of it working.
Not really.
Well-
I think she thought the system is more rigged than it is because I think most people have never been exposed to national attention, and you
No.
can speak to this.
Exactly.
They have no idea what the pressure like that you've experienced. Like
Right.
you've experienced some at a young age, as a person who had no desire to be famous other than be a great athlete. Out of nowhere, you get hit with this barrage of attention where you're on Fox News and this and that, and newspapers, and some people are labeling you in the most horrible way, and some people we're proud that she's standing up for women in sports, and you got this conflict, and you're in the fucking center of it.
Right.
And you got crazy people who rush the stage and hit you, and the cops say we can't do anything that doesn't show us as an ally to that community. Like. That's not even America. Like, where are you? That's La La Land. They're living in the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. Those people are out of their fucking minds.
The Willy Wonka chocolate factory sounds better than America.
It sounds way better. But they're literally out of their minds. Like, and this is unsustainable. And
It is.
At some point in time.
And we'll realize that because honestly, truth and sanity, they always prevail.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a matter of time. Unfortunately, it takes unfortunate circumstances like the whole Leah Thomas thing, like the San Francisco State thing, like the things that continue to happen. It takes those
Yeah.
to really see the harm and the severity and the likelihood that they continue at an exponential rate. So again, I kind of look at what's going on, or in particular, what happened to me as a lemons to lemonade thing, right? You take something that should have never happened to anyone, but you do good with it, and that's certainly what I've been trying to do over these past 2 years. And it has. There's been a lot of good stuff that's been done. We see a lot of the negative. We see a lot of the bad. And certainly that's what's highlighted because that's what gets attention. That's what gets clicks. That's what gets likes. But now, in just 2 short years, 24 states have some sort of fairness in women's sports bill when only, I think 3 years ago, only 1 state did. So that's pretty incredible. Lots of traction, lots of momentum. Like I said, 4 states implementing a bill now that defines the word woman. We've seen lots of pushback at the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. So there's been lots of good things that have been done. And I certainly choose to celebrate the little wins when we get them.
Well, what you've done is very courageous because I know the kind of pressure that you must have experienced. And I know the hate that's come your way. And you handle it with class. And that is not a learned thing. And I think that speaks to one of the things that I think is like one of the most important things that kids can ever get involved in, and that's sports.
Definitely.
I know people think of sports as being like, if you're an intellectual, you think of it as being like a jock or a meathead thing. But it teaches you a resolve. It teaches you when you have to swim 6 hours a day, like you have to be strong
and it
mentally.
transcends
Yeah.
beyond just your athletic achievements.
Which is my point, is how you can handle this, the way you can handle it.
And honestly now, like, I love pressure. I love it. I love setting goals and achieving those goals, which sets me up perfectly for this position. And you're right. Like, I would highly encourage. My parents did it. My parents made me play sports. And when, my dad being a professional football player, he did not, I won't say he never really cared what sport I played, but when I started swimming, he's like, Riley, come on, that's not a sport. I'm like, Dad, it is a sport. Like, it's hard. Like, we work hard. He's like, no, Riley, that's not a sport. Then I started dating a swimmer, and my dad was like, Riley, any sport, his justification was any sport where a man has to wear panties and competes. Like, they're gay, Riley. He's like, you're dating someone who's gay. I'm like, Dad. And now he's my husband. And now, of course, he knows he's not gay and he's the best. But it's just, all that to say.
Funny. That sounds funny.
Yeah. He's, I had to refrain him from going in the locker room at that national championships. I called him. I'm like, Dad, there's a man in our locker room. Because we didn't know this was going to be the arrangement until we saw it. Until we were actually in there with this, again, 6'4" man stripping down, fully intact, exposing himself inches away from where we were simultaneously fully undressed, right? Like, I can't even put into words, like, the feeling of having your back turned and all of a sudden, again, naked, hearing a man's voice in the locker room. It's like, It was innate, inherent for every girl in that changing space to cover themselves. Like whether it was with their hands or their towels or their clothes, like it was inherent.
That's so psychotic.
So I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, there's a man in this locker room. He's like, Riley, I'm coming down there and I'm going to handle this myself. And I really was like, Dad, like he would do that. And I'm like, no, we already have one man in the locker room. We don't need to. And secondly, like you'll go to jail and I don't want you there. So I got this. I can handle it. Which again, the things that I think set me apart from some of my teammates or competitors or other people in my same position is, right, playing sports. I credit so much of my success and impact that's been had to playing sports. Secondly, it's having a strong family foundation. I have two amazing parents who love each other. Everyone around me, like my grandparents, all in very healthy, loving relationships. I don't have a lot of divorce around me or in my family or anything like that. I have got lots of siblings. We're all so close. So I think my family foundation is a huge aspect too. Again, what kind of set me apart. And third, again, is my faith. Just knowing the outcome, like we just previously spoke about, like knowing how this all ends and really trusting that and having faith in that. And it just knowing the battle is already won. That's certainly what keeps me grounded and keeps, a smile on my face and an incredibly light heart, even when these crazy freaks at San Francisco are like running at me. The first thing I do is pray for them. I'm like, oh my gosh, you look miserable, and I can't imagine having that much hatred in my heart. So I think all of those things are kind of what maybe made me a little different. The combination of those things, no one thing over the other, but set me apart from some of my peers.
You're the right woman for the job when it came along. That's what it is. It's really like the universe put you in that position, because most people wouldn't be as uniquely disciplined about chasing this down as you are.
And it's a big task. Like there's always something. There's always some story. There's always someone. You would die. Actually, I know you're similar, right? Where like the messages I get daily from parents, from coaches, from young female athletes who this is happening to, who they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I just talked to the girl. I don't know if you saw this video. It was the basketball game in Massachusetts recently, where you've got this
yeah, I did see it.
6-foot-something guy who injured 3 girls before halftime of this game, causing the team to have to forfeit because they didn't have enough players left to play the game. Talking with this team and this girl, like she's 13 years old and she's getting pummeled to the ground by this guy, and she's online reading the comments and stuff, and which I never advise, but she is, and there's people calling, this girl a wuss and saying that she's being a baby and she's fine, and she reads that, and it's really hard for her.
Guarantee you those people don't play sports.
Of course not, right?
No, they're just nuts.
You know what clip I loved? It was on this show talking about Keith Olbermann.
That guy's the gift that keeps giving.
He's the gift that keeps giving. And he
is the
never,
Babylon Bee version of a Democrat. He really is.
I want to know if he's still crying urine. Did you see all that?
What was going on with him?
The Supreme Court ruling, 9-0 in Trump's favor, of course, and he commented back to someone on social media. It was like someone was basically like, dude, cope. Cry harder. Your liberal tears taste awesome. And he said, these aren't tears, you fascist. It's pee or urine. And I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? You're crying urine? I'm so confused.
It's crazy to say that's fascist too.
But I saw this clip on your show where you were highlighting, how he came for me. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, who are you? I don't even know who you are.
Anything.
And I'm that's hilarious, right? I very proudly finished my career as a 12-time All-American, 5-time SEC champion, the SEC record holder, the fastest person to ever come out of the SEC in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. I could keep going on. And it's like, this senile old man wants to attack me. He still lives with his mom in her basement. I had to ask my dad. I'm like, who is this guy? I don't even know who he is.
I think he has his own place, but he's definitely insane. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But he's insane in a very unique way. He used to be a really good baseball broadcaster. You know, it was
my dad
real baseball.
loved him.
But then he got really nutty during the Trump administration, and that Trump derangement syndrome, that's a real thing. It's a real thing. And I think there's some people that are fragile already. The world is just like the anxiety and this and that.
Right.
And also this position of being the person of virtue, the angry, loud voice of reason. That's a weird banner to carry when you don't have your own shit together. When your own life is chaos. Your fucking mental health is very unsteady. And you're out there preaching and telling people what to do. And as you start losing, and Trump's the president now, and you're like, he's going to get arrested, and he never gets arrested.
Right.
And then they're going to take him off the ballot, he's an insurrectionist. Nope, Supreme Court says unanimously.
Right.
No, it's like it just like it further compounds, and you never get a win. You never get a win. You got a little bit of a win when Biden won, and then the chaos after the Biden administration and all the things that we knew were true, that he was mentally compromised, all those things come out to be, and that's not a win. So then you're just in this constant state of like anxiety and chaos and saying nonsense things. Like almost like he wants you to come after him because you came after him so hard. It was so funny when you showed like all your medals and all your shit. Like, the fuck are you talking about, stupid?
And my motto is like, truly, like, and I feel like I, for the most part, pretty much live by this, like, don't punch down. Like, don't give someone attention when that's clearly what they're vying for is attention. But I literally could not resist myself when it came to him. And it was so tragic because I'm showing him, like, all the accolades and stuff. And as I picked one of them up, it's a glass trophy. I drop it, and I broke it. But let me tell you, it was so cool because the SEC saw this video that I had made and dropping one of my like all SEC first team honors, and they sent me a new one, and they're like, we're so sorry that you had to waste your time and break a trophy over Keith Olbermann. We wanted to send you a new one.
Well, good for them.
Totally.
Good for them. That's funny though. Even the way you handled it when you dropped it.
I'm like, whatever. I've got more of them. Who cares, Keith Olbermann? I don't care about this trophy. I don't even want this trophy.
The people like him are really fascinating because the social media interaction, it compounds mental illness in a way that I have never seen in my life with anything. There's nothing like it. It is a zombie apocalypse. It's weird. There's so many people that are just like deeply involved in social media interaction all day long. And
look, social media, of course, is a blessing. I would argue it's a bigger curse than it is a blessing. And you're right. We see people like on my X feed who are on there posting all day long. I'm like, what do you do? Do you have a family?
Yeah.
Do you have a life? Like, do you work? Like, I'm so confused how you have time all day long, every hour of every day to be posting something.
That's their life.
It is their life.
There's a lot of people like that is their life. And they sort of accumulate these bubbles of people that they communicate with. And
right.
They stay in these echo chambers and they exist there forever. And they don't go outside. And they wonder why they're depressed.
That's so true.
It is what it is. It's what it is.
Yeah.
Human bodies, I firmly believe, have a physical requirement. And if you don't meet that physical requirement,
you've got to get enough sleep.
Yep.
You've got to drink enough water.
All that.
You've got to exercise.
You have to.
And you're right. The people
you feel like shit.
Aren't doing these things.
Right.
Yeah.
They're on Twitter all day. It's compounding their mental illness. They're probably already medicated.
Definitely.
And then here they are just getting after it with strangers, getting, fuck you, you're Hitler, you fucking Nazi. It's so wild to see. And it's all getting accentuated by algorithms, specifically to try to extend your engagement and keep you hooked. And then when you see something like TikTok that will not let opposing viewpoints, even viewpoints that are clearly,
even if you question
yeah.
the narrative.
But meanwhile, if you go to China, their TikTok's all about scientific achievements, athletic achievements, martial arts. It's all about positive role models, exercise routines. It's all like super, and you can't be on after 10 p.m. Go to sleep. Go to sleep.
Crazy.
Get ready for war.
Yeah. No, they're laughing at us.
100%. I'm laughing at us. How are they not laughing at us?
Totally.
When I see Rachel Levine stand in front of everybody and give advice on health, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's so true, right? Not only the fact that this is someone who is injecting themselves with foreign and unnatural hormones and substances. Rachel Levine is obese. I'm like, why are you our Assistant Secretary of Health or whatever the name is when you're quite literally overweight.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure I should be listening to you
The
on
whole
anything?
administration, they've stuffed some of these like very questionable people that happen to be non-binary or trans or whatever into
All
these
over.
roles just for optics. That's what they did with that Sam Brinton guy, the guy that was stealing
Suitcase
women's
stealer.
clothes. That
The
fucking lunatic.
suitcase stealer.
He had some job with nuclear waste disposal. He looks like a Dr. Manhattan character.
Totally.
He literally you look at him with his shaved head and his lips. He looks like a bad guy in a superhero
Totally.
movie.
Yeah. No,
Stealing women's clothes.
and you're right. They've sprinkled that throughout in
Yes.
all of the different departments and realms, and here we are suffering the consequences.
It's so bizarre because, again, in other wars, you had to use weapons. You had to. That's the way to do
Forget
it.
it.
I mean, they had espionage. They definitely did steal information and find out strategies
Right.
and tactics, but not like today, like
No.
where you can literally
Unprecedented.
infiltrate a whole section of the country and have them believe that they have to adhere. If you're going to be left, if you're going to be on the side of the good people that want a social safety net and they want welfare and free education, if you're going to be on that side, you also have to be on the side where perverts don't exist anymore. There's no more sex offenders. There's no more pedophiles. There's minor attracted people and trans men, and gender dysphoria is just problematic and transphobic. And what it really is just your identity. And there's a spectrum of genders, and if you don't use Zer, we're going to put you in a cage.
Crazy, but so true.
But this is
It's reality.
But this is 2024. This didn't exist in 2004.
No.
What does 2044 look like?
And that's honestly what we should be asking ourselves. I think too often we get kind of wrapped up in like the here and the now, and ultimately that's how we've gotten to this point, right? You give an inch, I take a mile type thing, and we don't see the harm in it at the time. But yeah, we should be looking ahead 20 plus years, 5 years at this matter. Things are so expedited. We should be looking ahead 5 years.
Yes.
And again, if we're willing to deny man and woman, what's the next thing they're going to ask us to deny? And it sounds crazy, but like age, we've seen some people who identify as trans age out of Canada and different places, even some here in the States, who write this story of this like 55-year-old some man competing with the 13, 14 girls.
Yeah, he identifies as a 15-year-old girl.
Which sounds crazy,
And
but it's
changed
the
in the
exact...
locker room with them.
It sounds crazy, but that denying age is the exact same premise as denying sex.
You can't deny race yet.
No, not yet.
That's the line.
Not yet.
But
yeah, that
some
one's-
people have tried it with Korean.
Yeah.
That one dude, he got his
Yeah.
face. He said that he was
he-
transracial. He believes he's Korean, so he got his face like operated on, so he'd look with more Korean-like features.
He's come around now. And
He's not anymore. He's
well, I don't know the status of like surgical procedures, but I think he has a book out now that talks about kind of like how he was totally enthralled in like K-pop and all this stuff and really believed to be a part of this, but now is like and like all the woke gender ideology stuff, and now he's totally like, whoa, what did I do?
now he's going to go to CPAC.
Now he's going to go to CPAC. That's what he's doing now.
That would be a good move for a guy like that, strategically for a career. If you
Yeah.
want more attention, just go hard right. Go,
Just all the way. No looking back.
I want to be a man again, it says.
No, the title of the thing is down here.
Oh, his detransitioning journey. Yeah, but it says, I want to be a man again. Was he ever a woman?
I mean, I don't know what the title was. This is just like the beginning of the thing. So
Yeah. There's always been crazy people, folks. And when you give crazy people the opportunity to be protected under the walled garden of the LGBTQTAI+, you're inviting crazy people to infiltrate your
Of course you are.
organization, which will fuck up any legitimate concerns that people have of letting people live whatever the way they want to live. The way I look at this and the way I look at all things is I don't ever want to tell people what to do. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. But I'm always very concerned when people do want to tell people what to do, because I know what that thought
sets
process.
off-
Yeah, it sets off alarms.
Yeah.
Because like I don't want to control people. Why are you trying to control people?
Right.
What is your thing about? Some people like to control people. It's a natural inclination that human beings have had since the beginning of time. They do it through gossip and rumor and try to destroy people's character.
Right.
They do it through subterfuge and sabotage and espionage. They want fucking power.
Of course.
It's normal and natural. And if you just operate on that principle always, look at the people that are trying to restrict your rights. And why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Because people do that. That's a thing people do. You might not do that because you're a good person.
Right.
You know, maybe you're just a normal person who wants to just live a normal life and play golf on the weekends and have a family and be normal. There's people out there, that's not their game.
That's not their game.
Their game is a different game. And you got to be able to see that. And
Yeah.
if you can't see that, you're just going to go along with it because you're a good person. And life affirming, saving, gender affirming care. You just say the words.
Right.
They don't even mean anything to you. You're just saying what everybody in your cult says.
Totally. And I could not agree more, right? These people who say, you're transphobic or you're anti-trans. First of all, that doesn't hurt my feelings. I don't really care if someone says that about me. But second of all, look, my stance isn't anti-trans. If, just like you said, what someone else does behind closed doors, what Leah Thomas does behind closed doors, no, I don't support it. No, I don't agree with it. But live your life. Just like I'm going to live my life. Like
Yeah.
you said, I don't want someone telling me how to live. So no, I don't agree or support, but do as you do. It shouldn't cost my taxpayer dollars. It shouldn't affect my rights. But if it doesn't, by all means. So really, the stance that I'm taking, that I feel like majority of Americans have taken, is advocating for transparency more than anything, right? Like, if something is advertised for women, boom, it's for women.
By the way,
That's
it's
not to say
only
you can't have a co-ed.
But it's only
team.
women that are getting harmed by this. Only women.
whole thing.
And it was always to protect women until women became less oppressed than someone else. And
Come
that
on.
is trans women. And that's
There
what they
was
did.
a,
It's an oppression Olympics.
Oppression
It really
Olympics.
is.
There was the regional college track and field meet where a male runner competing on the women's team at Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, in New York, this past week competed, broke the regional meet record, of course.
Crazy.
The girl who got second was an African-American female. Let's call this what this is. This is a white man standing atop the podium. Left, crickets. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. So I think Oppression Olympics is actually a great way to put it.
Really what it is, because no matter who you are, trans trumps that. It's the ace.
It's the
Yeah.
top.
It's the top.
And if you're a black trans man, or I guess what they would call, a black trans identifying male, you're the king.
Black trans
slash
woman
queen.
or black trans man?
See, it's a male.
So you
It's trans
biological
woman,
male?
but I don't like
Trans
saying
woman.
all that. Remember?
Oh, okay. Right,
yeah.
right.
Silly stuff.
So trans.
A trans identifying male who is
Right,
black, who's a
right.
man who identifies as a woman.
You win.
You are the winner. You are the most oppressed. Which, what a odd world we live in, to where you want to be a victim. You want to be marginalized. You want to be an oppressed. Because what's the alternative? An oppressor. And we have learned as a society that there is nothing worse than being an oppressor.
Right.
So you'll do anything, and not to dilute what it means to be trans or people who genuinely struggle with gender dysphoria, not to dilute this, but people would much rather be oppressed than be an oppressor. And the white man has always been the oppressor. Not anymore. They found a way to really curb that. Just say you're a woman. Grow out your hair, put some lipstick on,
And you can dominate women.
and you can get into women's prisons. That's a
Yeah.
big push we've seen.
47 biological males are in California prisons right now.
Crazy. You know how many, to your point, how many women went into men's prisons in California?
How many?
One.
What?
She had 3 months left of her sentence, so no time. But yeah, we've seen in New Jersey, Ohio, California, Kansas, New York. In New York, they have posted placards in all women's prisons talking about pregnancy prevention. And you know what they did in California prisons over on Super Bowl Sunday, where everyone's distracted, right? Like no one's paying attention. They had supervisors come in working overtime to implement in women's facilities, women's prisons, condom dispensers and dental dams. So not only, look, sex in prisons is not allowed. You're not allowed to do that, or not supposed to do that anyways. But by putting condoms in all women's facilities, not only are you essentially allowing it, it's as if you're encouraging it.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's nuts. But I mean, how many pregnancies did they have before they had to do that? How many instances
Multiple.
of STDs did they have before they had to do that?
And that's the thing. I've seen in California prisons now where AIDS and HIV is running rampant in women's prisons. I know it. It's crazy. But again, to your point, like, even the whole language thing we talked about, like, we don't see men's language being infiltrated
Right.
and taken over like we have this attack on the word woman or the
Right.
word female. There was just a bill in California, again, last week, where it would replace female in all state statute with the word person. We're not seeing that go the other way. I think for a couple reasons. First and foremost, men wouldn't put up with it for a second. Could you imagine, right? Like, women are now called cervix havers or uterus owners or menstruators or bleeders
Breastfeeders.
or chest feeders
feeders,
or,
yeah.
or birthing person. Could you imagine the equivalent, right, to egg producer? If we started calling men sperm producers or we started calling men erection havers, could you imagine the outrage from men? But it shows you, too, like, the minute men felt threatened with the whole Bud Light thing, Bud Light essentially lost $27 billion overnight. But their next commercial, which shows you how money moves a lot of this stuff, their next commercial was a big burly man on a motorcycle with the camo can. Like, they're not following red or blue, they're following green. But it shows
Right.
you, too, like, we talk a lot, especially in this space that I've kind of been involved in, of the physical differences between men and women. But I think how the whole language scene, how I portray it, is we see the innate characteristic differences between men and women, because the same assertive, dominant men who have always and will always be men are the same men claiming to be women, demanding the language that we use. And the same apologetic, emotionally driven, empathetic women who have been and will always be women, when they enter into a man's space, they're not demanding anything, because again, they're the same women they always have been. And it shows the differences that we possess within our characteristics almost innately.
Without a doubt. And it's such an important point to point out, because this is the problem that a lot of feminists are having, where these biological males are calling themselves women and entering into these women's spaces and then dominating the way men dominate things.
Right.
And behaving the way men behave.
Of course.
And it's, unfortunately, a lot of it is supported by a lot of these older liberal women, which is really strange. It's like they can't see, like, this is you. This is your group. And for being virtuous, for the sake of, like, signaling to the tribe that you're willing to be a fucking loon and buy into this where it makes no sense whatsoever. It's a tribal thing. It's a cult thing.
I testified before Congress last month or whenever it was, about the importance of, or I guess really urging the Biden administration to halt with their illegal administrative rewrite of Title IX. I've testified before Congress and the Senate many times, and so, which it's unfathomable to me that a 23-year-old, recent college graduate, college swimmer at that, has to go to D.C. to sit in front of our members of Congress, again, the beating heart of the American Republic, and explain to them that men and women are different. And then to be on the other side of that table and watch as they have these super confused looks on their faces. And so I'm there testifying. One of the Democrat witnesses, I forget her name, but she was the president of the National Women's Law Center. In her testimony, she says that women should just learn how to lose more gracefully. I'm like, did you really just say that? And you're the president of the National Women's Law Center. What a disgrace you are.
What a crazy thing to
And
say.
it was hilarious because Representative Lee, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, she was the ranking member. It was supposed to be, I believe, Katie Porter, who didn't show up. But anyways, ranking member Lee, she starts reading her opening monologue. The first words that come out of her mouth is she says, "I can't believe that I'm forced to sit here and listen to this transphobic bigotry." And really, I felt so sad when I heard that because, again, a sitting member of Congress, and she resorts to name calling, not dissuading from my side with facts or logic or reasoning or common sense or science. What happened to follow the science, right? Name calling. And so it's my turn to read my testimony, and I read it, I finish it, and I didn't even mean to say this, but it just kind of came out of my mouth. And I looked at her and I said, Representative Lee, if my opening testimony makes me transphobic, then understand by your own logic, your opening monologue makes you a misogynist, which, as you can imagine, sent the hearing into a tailspin. I don't think she has ever actually heard this word misogynist accurately used in a sentence, because about 60 seconds later, after her staff ran over to her and showed her the definition, about 60 seconds later, she raises her hand and she says, I want her words removed from the record on the grounds of engaging in personalities, is what she said, which Marjorie Taylor Greene was in that hearing. And so she buzzes in and she says, I would call a man posing as a woman someone who's engaging in personalities. And then it's like, then it's really like, I'm like, oh gosh, what have I done?
No, it's a Jerry Springer show.
Totally. I'm like, oh gosh, people are about to start jumping over like tables. But anyways, let it be known, congressional record still stands. There was no grounds to remove my words. She is, in fact, still listed as a misogynist. Her Wikipedia page even says it, because someone sent it to me the other day, which I think is hilarious. But anyways, all that to show they hate when their own intersectional language is used against them. And my thinking behind that, right? Like, if being pro-woman, because that's my stance. It's pro-reality, pro-fairness, pro-truth, pro-common sense, pro-woman.
Right.
If being pro-woman is seen as anti-trans, then wouldn't being seen as being pro-trans inherently be anti-woman? And what do we call someone who's anti-woman?
A misogynist.
We call them a misogynist.
Yeah. It's just, it's so strange that the language has been twisted so far that just saying what you were saying about protecting women's sports, this person, their first response is to call it bigoted transphobia. It's so strange. Like, if you don't agree with me, you're Hitler. It's that far off.
It is. It is. The names I've been called, right? Everything under the sun. Transphobic, homophobic, racist, white supremacist, domestic terrorist, a fascist. The list goes on. Which, again, it makes those words lose their meaning.
It does.
Like, being a racist is a terrible thing. But you're going to call me a racist for saying that women deserve equal opportunities? Not really sure how that equates. And when you say that, the word racist loses its meaning.
Yeah, it's just people playing a game. It's whack-a-mole.
Totally.
They just like, find a target and they think they can go after it and they throw all their stupid words at it. And there's a giant percentage of this country that's mentally ill and also unstable in the sense of how they view the future. They see what's going on in Gaza. They see what's going on in Ukraine. They see President Biden getting tripped by ghosts. And they're like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what is this? And they're all terrified.
Right.
And they're engaged in all this online nonsense all day long, arguing with people. And they think they're activists and they're blocking the highway for climate change. They're just like a giant swath of our population that's out of their fucking minds. And I don't fault them. You're being raised through this coddling university system. You're being introduced as a young, influential person to these preposterous Marxist ideas that have never worked anywhere, that I always equate with rabies. It's like rabies kills like 99% of the people. Imagine being someone who's like, yeah, but it's just like no one's figured out how to do rabies right. Like, I'm going to do rabies right. That's what communism is. It's
totally.
It's ruined every single fucking country it's ever been implemented in. And we're like, yeah, but we got to do it right.
But we can do it.
It's the dumbest fucking idea of all time. But young people are easily suggestible, are easily influenced. They don't have life experiences. They don't have especially if you've never engaged in anything like truly difficult. One thing I notice about like high level athletes in particular is that there's no room for bullshit. There's no room for bullshit. If you're in the pool 6 hours a day, there's no room for bullshit. There's no room for your fake talk and nonsense, and this is what it is. And if I don't appreciate it for what it is, then I'm losing time. Then I'm fucked.
Exactly.
And I'm behind. Like it's like there's a level of discipline that's involved, and it's one of the reasons why high level athletes make great leaders, because they have the ability to discern what's real and what's not real because they've had to deal with it with themselves. Exactly. Whereas a lot of people just don't. And so they just find other people online that can affirm their feelings. And then I developed a new neo pronoun and they're like, oh, you're amazing. It's like they get fucking cat ears and they're on Twitch all day. We're like, this is the future.
It's true.
This is our future.
It is. And I find that to be very true. There's I think an Ernst & Young study that showed, I think 94% of female executives, so C-level executives, so like a CEO, CMO, whatever, 94% of those women were female athletes, which is to your point, like,
Yeah.
it's because they understand leadership. They understand having a sense of self that's bigger than yourself. Like it's these people who haven't played sports or really haven't been involved in anything other than like their weird activism. Like they don't understand what being on a team and working together towards a goal, a tangible, real goal, is like. And that's why they're all selfish and narcissistic and entitled and little babies.
Well, it's a much more difficult path, and most people aren't going to be willing to do it. They're not going to have the willpower. They're not going to have the discipline. And they're not going to continue, especially when you think about like your athletic career and how many accomplishments you achieved and then kept going and kept going and kept going. It's a very different mindset, but it's a mindset that if you can acquire at a young age, and it does come with sacrifice and it comes with, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. If you can acquire that, it will be a superpower for the rest of your life.
Of course.
And there's people that appreciate that, and there's people that don't understand that they're malnourished. They don't understand they're malnourished emotionally, physically, psychologically. They're malnourished. They haven't experienced enough truly difficult things, like where they've had to power through and develop confidence and understand themselves, to the point where they don't even know what that means.
No.
So they're just out there screaming out the window. And like the lady with the beanie on in the street. She's my favorite. She's my favorite. That fucking meme comes up so often. I love that lady.
And you like it every time.
I bet she's a Republican now. I
Probably.
bet she's
been
red pilled.
She's been red pilled. Yeah, she's
probably
been
start
red
watching
pilled.
some YouTube clips. Go, hey, wait a minute. Jordan Peterson makes some really good points.
Yeah. No, honestly. No, it's all true. It's crazy world. Crazy times.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah. At least we can talk about it. And I think there's more people that are listening now than ever before, because there's outlets where you can actually have these conversations instead of being trapped in some fucking MSNBC bubble.
And it's real now.
Yeah,
it's
real.
reality now. It's not just people saying things that sound, you know, like we were mentioning, like, I never want to sound like some big conspiracist or doomsday person who's like preparing for the end of the world, right? Like,
But
it's like the stuff that maybe, like we've said, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like we thought, oh, that will never happen.
right.
We've arrived.
Yeah, we've arrived.
We're here. And I went off the train. I went off the roller coaster. But it's not that easy. And people are realizing that, like I said. So I think due time.
It's hard to experience something and not be aware that this is very unusual, and that it's just normal life for us. It's like, God, life is so crazy. But if you could look at this from an overhead perspective, if you had like a graph and showing what's happening in the world from 2004 to 2024, you'd be like, whoa.
Oh. And I honestly think about that with myself. Like, I was one of those people, right? Like, again, always been Christian, always have aligned with conservative values. But I had my head down. I was focused on my success, more importantly, my team's success. I was focused on my career. I was focused on my, personal relationships, getting married at a young age in college. Like, I was focused on not the cultural stuff going on around the world. So I think to myself, like, it is so unfortunate that I had to be directly impacted before I cared. But I did. Like, I honestly did. And if all of us have that same mindset that unfortunately I had, like, it's too late. We're screwed, quite frankly. Like, that's why it's crucial that you find your voice. You speak up about stuff. You call out an injustice when you see it. You hold their feet to the fire.
Yes.
Before you're directly impacted. Because, again, if we all wait just like I did, and I wonder to myself, like, obviously this is not the path I would be on if I hadn't spoken up about it at the time. But, like, would I shouldn't say would I care. I think I would always care, but, like, would I take action to do something about it if it hadn't impacted me? Probably not. Like, being real here, like, I know myself. I know, again, I always would have seen it as wrong and something that's harmful to society for sure, but not enough harm being done that I would feel compelled to speak about it. But it took me being impacted. So if it can be of encouragement to anyone else, and why it's crucial that we do find our voices and we do act boldly and courageously, which I hate to say, it even requires courage to say the things that you and I say. Like, that shouldn't be courageous. That shouldn't be brave. No, you know who's brave? What about those 3 soldiers who were just transferred back from Jordan a couple weeks ago? Or our law enforcement officers, or first responders, or our veterans, or our active duty officers? Like, those people are brave. Not me for saying there are 2 sexes, you can't change your sex, and each sex is deserving of equal opportunity, privacy, and safety. But it is. I understand that it does require a sense of courage. So if that can be
I agree with
of
everything you said
encouragement.
about soldiers, first responders, but you're being brave as well. It's like there's a real social pushback that's very difficult for a lot of people to handle. And and in a time where people are so concerned with mental health, why are you not concerned with the mental health of people that you attack? Because you're not. Because
No.
you treat them as non-humans, and
And
you're
right,
allowed
they
to
do
be.
it under the guise of tolerance
Yeah, it's
and
nonsense.
acceptance. But that is not what I see.
It's nonsense, and it's a trap. It's a trap for them too. You're not supposed to be behaving like that. You should be
No.
embarrassed yourself if this is the way you engage with ideas. If your ideas were strong enough to stand on their own, they should be debated with a bunch of people that are rational and level-headed and can talk about the pros and cons of each one of those things. And if they did that, this trans thing would have never gotten into women's sports, not a single
No.
fucking time. All the data, every single piece of data shows that men have an advantage. They have an advantage in like spatial geometry. They have an advantage in lung size, heart size. They have an advantage in the shape of the hips. They have an advantage pretty much across the board in bone density, except some populations of African American women. But then in some men, like weightlifters are different. Like there's a bunch of variabilities, but reaction time's way faster. There's a bunch of things.
Exactly.
And there's also the male mind, like the hunter-gatherer mind. That's a real thing.
Right.
There's something to that. And it's why men win at chess. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
Right.
Like, why aren't women better at chess? Why do men win at pool? What is it about like the high level competitors in a bunch of these different things that don't seem to require physical strength where men still win? Because there's some creepy advantage that men have.
And I get pushback for this all the time, especially on the chess thing. Like I say, if it's a women's chess tournament, men shouldn't play. And people will come for me, the trans rights activists, and they'll say, oh my gosh, like you're saying that women are stupider than men. And I'm like, hold on. First of all, it's not what I'm saying. Second of all, I don't care if it's chess. I don't care if it's poker. I don't care what it is. Again, if it's for women, it's for women, bottom
Right.
line.
Right.
So, yeah.
If it's a women's tea party,
It's for women.
it's for women. Yeah. It's like they just want a place where they get and
Yeah.
have no men.
Yeah.
That should be okay.
Yeah.
It should be okay if men want to have a men's only cigar bar. That should
Totally.
be okay.
Yeah.
Like,
and
if
that's
it's your business.
It's a good point. It goes both ways. Like we
should.
talk a lot about the perspective from women's privacy and safety and different things being threatened, but men are just as deserving as
Right.
single sex spaces.
But here's the difference. Men don't feel physically threatened
Right.
if a trans man is in the locker room with me.
No.
Like if a trans man's in the locker room with me, I'm like, "What's up, dude?" Like I don't care.
Right.
Like I'm not nervous you're going to rape me,
Right.
right? I'm not nervous that you can see my dick. This is normal stuff.
Right.
But if a woman is in a locker room with a fully intact man who's 6'4", who's walking around pretending he's a woman, that's madness. Now you're like, oh my God, like the no rules apply. It's like,
Exactly.
what happened to perverts?
They're still there,
Yeah.
They're still there.
But now they're amazing.
but now they're beautiful.
It's just a weird fucking thing that everyone's accepted, and that to push back on it like this is seen as so problematic and so
Controversial.
transphobic and so it's just so confusing. But I think it's shifting the other way. I really do, because I see it with young kids today. I see it with like high school kids. I see it with most people that I interact with on a daily basis are happy that someone is saying something about this instead of just what they see in the New York Times and what they see in all the mainstream, which if you had to like make a list of all mainstream media, whether it is newspapers, magazines, television channels, what's the ratio of liberal to conservative? Is it like 10 to 1, 8 to 1? What is it?
I mean, probably about, right? Especially if you're looking at a lot of the local outlets, local papers, right? Like, there's a ton more liberal outlets. I think from, mainstream media, like we have CNN and we have Fox. But in terms of who controls the media, definitely.
Yeah.
It's, I mean,
again,
probably 10 to 1. I don't know.
If I wanted to destroy the country, and I was some
If
evil
you
person
did.
from another planet or wherever, and I had my tinfoil hat, and I was looking at this, like, I would say, well, this is a good way to do it. Like, just control all the media and have all the media say all these things like life-saving, gender-affirming care. Say those statements a lot, and, trans rights, and this administration
Exactly.
is committed to trans rights. Oh, trans rights, that's important.
Yeah.
And, like, everybody else is a Nazi, so you got to be on board
I
with
want to
this.
know, I hear all the time trans rights are human rights. Literally, what right do you or I possess that a trans person or someone who identifies as trans doesn't possess?
It's a good point.
I've
have
never
extra ones.
heard exactly.
extra ones.
But
They can
honestly,
compete
it's
with
so
women.
true. Like the whole like idea of all the like DEI affirmative action stuff. Like, we are living in a time the most diverse and inclusive as a nation we have ever been. Yet people are still acting like this is the most oppressed they've ever been, which shows you truly like these people aren't happy with themselves. Like, if you have to demand what someone else calls you to feel affirmed, you're clearly not secure enough with yourself. And I'm not going to affirm that. If you don't even know what you are, you expect me to know what you are? No way. You don't even know what you are.
Well, it's a compliance thing. But it's like, look, there's always going to be people taking advantage of any sort of discourse, any sort of like open subject of discussion that's hot on everybody's mind, which is whether it's race or any. When it's race, you're always going to have race hustlers. You're
course.
always going to have these Al Sharpton type characters that
course.
slide on in and they act as a spokesperson, and and there's always going to be business behind that. Like Jesse Jackson had like a whole business behind that.
Of course.
And you're always going to have these folks. You're always going to have these folks that, maybe provide some good, but also make a lot of money. And they're at the forefront of all these things. And you're going to have that with trans rights. You're going to have that with gay rights. You're going to have that with everything. You're always going to have some people that capitalize on something and they interject themselves into it and they use it to like stir people up. And they always call people either racist or transphobic or homophobic. And they use all those pejoratives. You're always going to have those people, but we have to learn how to ignore those morons. We have to learn how to just recognize, like, oh, that person's...
And honestly, like what I've realized, because again, like initially taking that first step, it was hard for me to read a lot of the things that were written and like, because again, a very natural woman, I think a pretty human thing. Like, I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to step on toes. I don't want to be disrespectful. So it's hard for me to read a lot of what was being said about me online. But I realized pretty quickly, honestly, that the hate and the attacks that I were getting they kind of fell into three categories, one of three. One, it was calling me some sort of phobia or ism. And like I said, those words lost their meaning pretty quickly to me. Two, it was some sort of personal attack, like you're ugly or like your hair extensions look bad, and I'm like, this is my real hair, thank you, question mark. Or something to the effect of maybe you should have just trained harder, which is Keith
Hilarious.
Olbermann, right?
That's
like
someone eating Cheetos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once you realize there's no substance to anything these people are saying, really, and understanding the profiles, because again, all of this is pretty much done through social media. I will tell you, other than protesters I've had like at campuses or events or something, like I have never once had someone in my day-to-day life come up to me and say something negative, but I've had thousands say something positive. So again, most of this is done through social media. What I've noticed about the profiles it's coming from, they don't have a profile picture a lot of time. They're scared to put their own face and name to it. Two, they are someone who you can tell has never played a sport in their entire life and who has no grasp of the importance of playing sports and honestly the importance of winning and succeeding in your sport.
And how hard that is
And
to
how
do.
hard it is to do. Exactly. Once I realized this conglomerate of things, I thought to myself, gosh, this speaks a whole lot more to their own insecurities than it does my own. And now I have no problem reading these comments.
Yeah,
and
you're
most of the time
reading
I don't read
comments
them,
of
but
people that you would never communicate with in
Exactly.
real life. And also, a bunch of those burner accounts, they're probably not even American.
No.
It's probably a lot of troll farms are attached to it because it's a socially viable issue. So,
and understanding like social media is so not representative of reality, of real life. So where you get these influx of negative comments, that's not representative of any normal population, even in like your most liberal states. Like this issue consistently polls at 75+% of Americans disagree.
even in San Francisco?
Oh, I don't know about San Francisco.
In San Francisco, maybe 75 the other way.
Yeah, honestly. No, but
Everyone
really,
should be
like,
trans.
yeah,
You-
right.
You know what I'm hoping? I'm really
Tell me.
genuinely hoping. This is the cure for all this. If genetic engineering reaches a point where someone actually can become a woman.
Okay, but what's the qualifications for that? What would you say? What would you say a man who fully became a woman? What would that mean? Like a uterus?
Everything.
Well, what is it? Is it like a uterus implant? Like
No. Like we switch it all up.
so,
You put them in a box.
like
you
a
hit
Barbie?
the button. And you come out Matilda.
I'll wait
You
for
get
that
to be a
day.
woman. I mean, that's the only way it's ever going to really work. Because this idea of like surgery,
I don't know
like
if
all
I'm.
you're doing is art. You're doing art on a person's body.
But wouldn't that be a machine that did that too?
No. It's cellular. It's molecular.
Oh.
It's breaking
Okay,
down
so
your
you're
DNA.
talking
I'm
about
talking
changing
about
like chromosomes. and-
Yeah. Well, in the future, they're going to be able to do something probably pretty similar to that. They're already developing ways to edit genes. They're in China. These guys got arrested because they made these kids smarter. They literally edited the gene. They said they were just doing it to prevent HIV. Like, oh, we made them smarter. Whoops.
Whoops.
Accidental.
Sorry.
And this is all just, by the way, what we know about. I'm sure there's some top secret stuff that they've tried on human beings. There's no way they haven't. They in the HIV era, in the AIDS epidemic, they experimented on foster kids. They experimented with vaccines on foster kids and killed some of them. I mean, it's documented. You could
Right.
you could read all about it. The idea that they wouldn't clone people, shut the fuck up.
Come on.
They will do whatever they want. Whatever
course.
they want. Whatever they, especially in China, somewhere they can get away with it. So they're going to get to a point where they understand how to create a human being. And they'll probably say, listen, Riley, as you get older, wouldn't it be nice you take your 80-year-old brain, stick it in 20-year-old Riley's body? Let's go.
I'd like that.
It would be dope, right? And then people are going to go, well, it's really effective. My aunt did it, and she's incredible now. And you're an 80-year-old person with a 20-year-old body. And eventually, they're just going to be able to turn you into whatever they want. And it's going to be very bizarre. They're going to be able to change your height, change your intellect, change if they find certain things that would lead you to maybe have tuberculosis, they'll delete that, change
Just
this,
delete,
and edit
like-
that. Yeah, we're going to be editing
Which
human
sounds
beings.
crazy. But this,
does
what
sound
we're
crazy.
living through, would have sounded crazy 10 years
This
ago.
is crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I could FaceTime. I could be in Hawaii and you could be on Mount Everest. And if there's service up there, you could FaceTime. You could just talk to
That's
someone on
true.
the other side of the planet
It's true.
instantaneously. It's bananas. And we just take it for granted. We take for granted that we all have we could make a movie with this stupid little thing that sits in our pocket.
Crazy.
And we have access to any answer to any question we can have as long as Google approves
As
it.
long as Google approves
You know one of
it.
the things that Google didn't approve?
Tell me.
That story about the trans woman who, through Canadian services, so this is paid for by the Canadian government,
Okay.
decides that they want to breastfeed. And breastfeeds and develops milk through these medication and breastfeeds their 9-month-old baby.
Sick.
I tried Googling this. I couldn't find it.
Sick.
I go page after page after page. I go straight to DuckDuckGo. Bam! It's the second article.
Crazy.
I'm like, they're hiding this.
Of course
They're
they are.
hiding this story that is relevant.
No.
Did it? Maybe it's me. Maybe
It's
there's
you.
something
They're
with my
shadow banning
Google
you.
algorithm.
No, but it's true. Like,
No, but this is February 2018. This is a new one. The new
Yeah,
one is a
that's true.
50-year-old man who there's something creepy about him. There's a new one, Jamie. This isn't the one. See, this is why I couldn't find it. Go to DuckDuckGo. Is it right there? That's right. They're HIV positive. That's right. This is an HIV positive man, but two, by the way, who's breastfeeding his baby.
oh my gosh.
Super cool.
Super.
Super cool. Okay.
How
so
innovative.
You can find it. I couldn't fucking find it, Jamie. Maybe they changed it after we complained about it because I complained about it more than once. And but I found it on DuckDuckGo like that.
Oh my gosh.
Like that. But that story is insane. And if you have a hard time, and Google does,
they do.
curate. They
Yeah, they
curate
do.
searches. It's a fact.
Of course.
And Robert Epstein, who's a guy who's sort of documented how this affects elections, says this is essentially election manipulation to the point where, like, statistically you can prove that due to search engine results, you can move a candidate one way or the other. That it's possible. Because if you can only if you
Of
Google
course.
right, if you Google Donald Trump and you only find the most horrendous
Of course.
negative things, Donald Trump's success, and then you find corruption and scandal and greed. That's all you can find, and it takes forever and ever and
Naturally.
ever. Right, but if you say Joe Biden and you talk about the accomplishments, the up in the economy, the 3 years, everything's going great. Look at the inclusiveness. Look at how many lesbians are in the office. And when you do that, if that's all you find,
Of course.
a certain percentage of low information voters are going to go to that, and it's enough to move the needle by like 10%, 13%.
Probably
Who knows
more
what the
than,
number is? I don't
honestly,
know.
with how much people rely on social media.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And when you saw what Google did with their fucking wacky AI, where their
That's
wacky
crazy.
AI would not show white men,
I don't even... I can't even...
it's so crazy. The
Do
founding
they
fathers.
realize they're creating... Like, when they do stuff like that, they create more of a divide. Again, under the guise of unity.
I don't think they realized how nutty
Or again,
they had
maybe they
programmed
want
that.
the divide.
I don't think they realized how nutty they had programmed it. Nor do I think, even though they're in the internet, I think they're in the internet in this very leftist liberal bubble. And I don't think they truly comprehend like 4chan and truly comprehend all the people that are going to be very suspicious of Google's AI and ask it trick questions.
I want to know what Google's AI says about you.
Oh, God. I don't. It can't be good.
That's
be
actually a
good.
good thing, probably.
It can't be good. But I mean, fortunately, I've achieved escape velocity, where it's
Yeah.
like it's big enough where like people actually know who I am.
Whatever,
Like,
yeah.
you can talk all the shit you
That's a
want.
good point, yeah.
but that's what it is. It's like, but it takes a while to get there, and
Yeah.
they'll try to stop you every step of the way. And if you do achieve escape velocity, then they kind of shut up about you because then they realize every time they talk about you, it actually makes
It helps
bigger.
you.
Yeah,
Which
it's
is
not
this
good.
whole stuff with Donald Trump. Like,
Yeah, they don't get
everything
it.
that's going on with taking him off the ballots and I mean, all the different attacks they've had on him, trying to indict him and arrest him and blah, blah, blah. It's significantly helping him. Again, are they that stupid where they don't realize it? Or, like, are we being naive? Is this something they're going for? Like, it's hard to grasp. It's hard to fathom.
Well, it's people in a spiral, and it's like, people that are really emotional. They don't realize that what they're doing is actually hurting it. Just screaming out a car window. It's like, fuck you, no, fuck you. Like, you're not getting anything done. You're not getting anything done here.
No.
But they're just caught up in it. And they just want him to lose, and they had hope. They saw that he was being removed from ballots. Like, yes, justice is served. It's all those Biden super fans the New York Times interviewed. All these fucking zombies walking around New York City with their little dogs. Like, he's the best. Like, they're out of their fucking
little
minds.
dogs.
They're out of their fucking minds. No disrespect to little dogs,
I was going
Carl.
to say,
Poor little
justice for Carl. Justice for Carl. We love Carl.
But these people are literal zombies, and there's a lot of them. And
Too many.
Enough people that aren't that have to recognize that this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a giant percentage of the population that's literally lost its marbles.
So what do we do?
Keep talking. Keep talking, Riley.
Yeah.
This is like, because people will
I was
listen
hoping
to
you'd
you.
give me something more profound
Well,
because
I don't think
do
there
we
is.
have honestly though, like, it is mind-numbing to a degree to have to keep saying the same thing.
Right.
Like, I'm sick of saying that men and women are different.
Yeah. But
But it is. I agree. Like, you have to understand, like, not everyone hears that. So many people are deceived. Like, you can't even blame them because they don't know right from wrong. You can't blame them for not doing right if they were never really taught right. Or
Right.
they don't know what right is. So,
they've probably been taught something completely different than
Right.
that. And they've probably been taught some very skewed version of reality. And, unfortunately, there's no like mental health test to see if you should be raising children. You just get to raise them.
point.
And if you're a loon, your kids are probably going to be loony too. And the only thing that's going to get them out
Most
of
of
that
them are at least castrating themselves or not reproducing.
I just don't know how those people get out of this. I think for the logical, sane people, there's enough of us talking that we're just going, this is insane. Like what you're doing is you're leading us down this road to demise, and there's no roadmap. No one knows where we're going. And if you're going to change the definitions of everything and what Vivek wisely calls the tyranny of the oppressed, that the oppressed are forcing everyone else to comply with their desires and needs. And he's right about that, because that is what it is. And they feel because they have that title, they're above all, the tyranny of the oppressed.
Exactly.
Yeah. But if people listen to you, actually listen to you, and not just read the bullshit and the clickbait and listen to you talk, they see a very accomplished woman who's done amazing things in the world of athletics, who's confronted by this very unique challenge, and you're uniquely qualified to handle it. And so I think that's what they're going to get out of this.
I hope so. Because again, that's really all this is. I just wanted to swim. I just wanted to compete fairly. And then, boom, that was impacted. And here we are, just trying to make a difference when and where we can. So that's certainly what I hope people see me as. You're right, getting past the headlines. Anti-trans swimmer slams Leah Thomas.
Well, it's all that reductionist view of a
So
human
silly.
being. They just try to paint you in the worst possible light, the bigotry and the transphobia. Like, stop using those words and just talk about the reality of the facts of what we're talking about here, and you realize you don't have an argument.
No.
Your argument's based on nonsense.
Exactly.
That's what every parent needs to wake up and recognize. That's what every person hearing this, that's what every person that works in the schools needs to recognize. You're talking nonsense. And you're likely encouraging people who are mentally ill and maybe narcissists to dominate women's sports.
Mostly narcissists.
A lot of them.
A ton of them.
More than one.
More than one. A ton of them.
And they're encouraging this, and they're making this person go from being a mediocre male swimmer to being a fucking hero.
Exactly.
And that's nonsense. And if we want to embrace nonsense, that's the road to demise. Because nonsense does not stop there. If we can get away with that nonsense, it's going to go further and further and further.
Bring on the next thing.
Bring on the next thing. Minor attracted persons. And it sounds nuts. If you had told me this a long time ago, I'd have said, dude, don't bring that up. That sounds insane. No one's really going to accept that. But when you see people openly on film who are...
This lady from Kentucky, this Democrat representative or senator or whatever she is in Kentucky, who was mentioning in their state legislature, said something to the effect of, look, these minor attracted persons, there's a lot of benefit to having child sex dolls because it can help decrease their appeal and desires for actually, pursuing young children. So there was a bill introduced that would do just that. And I see this and I'm like, this lady is evil. There's really no other word for it. She's evil. And then the next day she comes out after it got national attention of what she had said and what she was advocating for is helping. I wouldn't even say it's helping curb these sexual predators' desires. It's feeding into it, honestly.
Right. Because if you've had that desire but never did it, and then you get a robot doll that's a little boy, that's the sickest thing I've ever heard.
But she came out the next day and said, I just feel like we should have room as adults for open discussions. There is no open discussion for pedophiles. There's no open discussions. I guess unless it's electric chair or life in prison, maybe we can have that discussion. But other than that, there is no discussion for pedophiles in this country, in this world.
I wonder if that woman has children.
Probably.
That's scary.
Isn't it?
That's scary. And again, it's just this cult thinking. And I don't know how it got into the education system, and I don't know how it got into these people's mouths where they got so confident in saying it that they could say it in front of cameras.
Well, it's because they're teaching it.
Right.
Even if you look at something like Scholastic, right? Like they put on these big book fairs and different things. Like obviously we've seen the books that they're bringing in to school, to grades as young as kindergarten, is crazy, which is why it's important to find alternatives. Like there's an alternative for everything, whether it's skincare. Okay, don't use Dove. We just saw their Super Bowl commercial, which was, it was so funny. It was, the protagonist was a young girl swimmer in a locker room. And the punchline of the whole commercial was about keeping girls in girl sports. So I see this watching the Super Bowl and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the first big organization who is like standing with women and like defending women's sports and saying no men in women's sports. I'm like, this is great. So I go to their like social media profiles because I'm like really trying to look into this and see if anyone else caught on to this or if it was just me and I was being hypervigilant. They were hiding all the replies that had mentioned keeping men out of women's sports. So I was like, oh my gosh, what virtue signaling fools, really. So instead of using Dove, use something like Nimi skincare.
They were hiding the replies.
Yeah.
So they made that ad, and they made that ad presumably for pro women in women's sports, right?
Yeah, but
then they're hiding.
Their hook to it was speaking to like the mental health of female athletes. But I saw it and was like, oh,
but at least
the
they're
best way to
advocating for
keep
female
girls
athletes.
in girls sport. Yeah, but Dove has outwardly expressed like the last Olympics in 2020 when Laurel Hubbard, or 2016, Laurel Hubbard, a man powerlifter from New Zealand, they were like, we love you, Laurel Hubbard. Here's our products. Be an ambassador, whatever.
Oh.
So they really don't. They do, but the best way, right, to keep girls in girls sports is to keep boys and men out of girls sports.
Yeah.
So don't use Dove. Use something like Nimi skincare. Or don't shop at Target. Use something like Yakima Apparel or Unitas or Scholastic, back to Scholastic, right? Don't use Scholastic. Don't buy your books from Scholastic. Use something like Brave Books, which is a phenomenal group and organization that produce these like pro-God, pro-country, pro-America, pro-family, wholesome books that aren't political. They're not partisan. But again, virtuous, and I think what kids need to read. So I think there's alternatives for everything, and I think that's how we make a difference ultimately, because like we've said, this movement really is driven by dollar signs and by money. And so while, of course, not everyone can give financially, what everyone can do is stop giving your money to organizations and companies that hate you.
Well, I think people woke up to that with Bud Light.
Definitely.
That's a real factor.
And it works.
It worked. And then they also woke up to it with Google. After Google's AI, their stock crashed hard. People are like, what the fuck are you doing? Because it was so nutty. Like, how could anybody invest in this? Like, let's get out of this now.
Right.
And what did they lose? How much did Google lose from that? It was something like $9 billion.
Crazy.
And you got lucky there. It should,
Yeah.
like, nobody should trust you ever again.
No.
If I was thinking about using a Google phone, I see that, I'm like, what? Get the fuck out of here. What you've done is, most importantly, you become like a logical face of all this and a reasonable face of all this and a person who can handle it. And you're really good at like confronting people that oppose it. And it's an interesting thing to watch you navigate it, but you're doing it really well.
Well, it's worth it. It's worth it, and it's necessary. So bring it on. Bring it on. Bring on the men in dresses. I'm
Yeah.
ready for them. There's a lot of things that scare me, but a man in a dress will never be one of them.
Okay. Well, listen, Riley, I really enjoyed talking to you. I appreciate what you're doing. And again, your courage. I know you don't like to think about it that way, but it is courageous. And it's important. And it's important for people to see the real you.
Well, thank you.
And I hope we did that. I think we
Definitely.
did.
I've got a book that has just dropped. It is being released in May. But believe it or not, of course, this is the short to kind of, I guess, the how and the why, right? Like the how I got here, the why I got here. It's called Swimming Against the Current, Fighting for Common Sense in a World That's Lost Its Mind. Also have a podcast of my own with Outkick called Gains for Girls, which has been super fun to be on the other side of things. But really, I couldn't appreciate you more giving the opportunity on a very large scale and really important for me too. Like, it's not just preaching to the choir.